When it comes to urban legends, I feel like I've talked enough about government conspiracies on here, so today I wanted to challenge myself to really dig for legends with elements of truth to them. So, question for y'all, what's one urban legend that you're absolutely positively sure is true? Let me know in the comments, and let's see if I can boggle some minds today. The phrase "walk a mile in my shoes" takes on chilling connotations when the shoes are probably made of real human skin. And although the creation of such a pair sounds so gruesome as to be unbelievable, these shoes exist and are displayed at the Carbon County Museum in Rawlins, Wyoming, where additional items reveal more of the story of the mysterious outlaw, Big-Nosed George Parrott. So what led him to such a grisly end? Well, even before he died, this man was known for frontier crimes. He'd been arrested for horse theft, tried by a justice of the peace, and acquitted. He was also believed to have kept headquarters in the hole-in-the-wall country west of present-day Casey, Wyoming, with a number of other outlaws at the time. So, not a good man. He developed a reputation for stealing from travelers on stagecoaches, and then progressed to train robberies. Specifically, in August of 1878, Big-Nosed George and his gang, which included Dutch Charlie Burris, planned a theft from the Union Pacific Railroad pay car near Como, Wyoming, east of Medicine Bow. At that time, the UPRR carried cash via the pay car monthly for its own company payroll. So the bandits loosened a spike on the rails, wrapped it with telegraph wire, and hid in the bush, planning to tug the spike and dislodge the rails to derail the train so they could steal away with the money. But sharp-eyed railroad employees spotted the wobbly spike, repaired the damage, and alerted lawmen before the train arrived. So Big-Nosed George and his men fled to Rattlesnake Canyon at the base of Elk Mountain, about 25 miles southwest of the crime. Carbon County Sheriff's Deputy Robert Widowfeld and Union Pacific Detective Henry Tip Vincent tracked them there, but the outlaws killed them. So Big-Nosed George and his gang were later reported to have stolen several $1,000s in cash from a Miles City, Montana territory merchant named Con, when in spring of 1879, Con accompanied the military paymaster's wagon train from nearby Fort Keogh to Bismarck, Dakota territory. Now Con was traveling to the east on a purchasing errand. The soldiers were headed to the North Pacific Railroad to retrieve funds to be distributed at the fort. One account indicates that the criminals apparently bragged in the Miles City bars about their recent successful exploits, including the Wyoming territory killings. Someone wired Carbon County Sheriff James Rankin, who headed to Montana in July of 1880, and brought Big-Nosed George back to Wyoming territory. Two other members of the gang had also just escaped. Rankin escorted his charge first to Laramie, and then rode with him on the train heading to Rawlins. On September 13th of 1880, Big-Nosed George was arraigned in Rawlins. He told his lawyer his name was George Francis Warden, and reported his birth date as being in April 1843 in Dayton, Ohio. He first entered a guilty plea, then changed his plea to not guilty, and then on November 16th, the jury was sworn, and 2 days later, George again changed his plea, back to guilty. Okay, make up your mind, dude. A motion was filed for arrest of judgment and sentencing, and the court took this under advisement, but denied the motion on December 15th. Now at that time, death by rope necklace was the punishment for those found guilty of taking a life, and Big-Nosed George was sentenced to hang on April 2nd. 10 days before the scheduled execution, though, he tried to escape from the local jail. Like, I don't blame him. You wanna, make out with your life. He had used a pocket weapon to saw through the rivets on the heavy leg shackles that bound him, and struck jailer Robert Rankin in the head with them. Now, Rankin's wife, Rosa, discovered the attempted jailbreak and managed to close the outside door, thwarting Big-Nosed George's plans. She fired her husband's revolver in the air, and the men came running to help. Big-Nosed George's hands were tied behind his back, and that's when he wound up with the noose around his neck. The mob made him stand on an empty barrel, tossed a rope over the crossbar of a telegraph pole, but the rope broke, so George fell and was begging to just please end it, stop tormenting me, this is not fun. But instead the mob was like, no, we're gonna replace the noose, and this time you're gonna climb a 12-foot ladder. So this time, with the repaired leg irons weighing him down, climbing was difficult for George, and finally he to death. One report estimated a crowd of as many as 200 people gathered to watch. Nobody came forward to claim the body, but Dr. Osborne, who had been asked to be present to ensure the outlaw, died, and another Rawlins doctor, Thomas McGee, a Union Pacific Railroad physician and surgeon, claimed the corpse for medical study. Osborne made a death mask and had the outlaw skinned, and the shoe was made. McGee studied the criminal's brain, and Big-Nosed George's skull was cut into 2 pieces. McGee gave the top half to his protege, Lillian Heath, who later became Wyoming's first female physician, so congrats to her. The lower skull half was buried in a whiskey barrel with the rest of the outlaw's bones. In 1950, the whiskey barrel was discovered in Rawlins when workers were excavating for a new department store at 5th and Cedar Streets, and the skull halves were briefly reunited and then split up again. So the skull cap is now housed at the Union Pacific Railroad Museum in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and the lower half of the skull skull is displayed at the Carbon County Museum in Rollins. I don't think I personally own anything made of animal products, and I don't feel like owning anything made up of human remains anytime soon. I'll leave that to my buddy Mysterion. He owns a collection of skulls, fingers, you name it. Number 3, tunnels under the graveyard. Honest to goodness, the moment I heard about this as a possibility, my modern brain started to think about all the ways this could be convenient today. Also, being a Disney girl, my brain did jump to the Utilidor system that runs under Disney World. Ooh, and the Toronto Path. Granted, I never really use it unless my dad's visiting and we're like walking around downtown, or if I'm trying to get to Union Station after a convention downtown. Pardon me, I know, off topic. So this legend claims that underneath the old Bearing Point Cemetery is a series of tunnels that used to be connected to the Salem Harbor. Used for smuggling or simply unloading ships, these tunnels would flood with the high tide. When digging graves, workers would simply open up shafts to these tunnels, and as the priest would ask the mourners to look up to the heavens, they would unceremoniously dump the bodies down these shafts to be washed out to sea. It sounds a smidge morbid and hard to believe, but that's the joy of legends. But here's the thing, it actually has like the tiniest glimmer of truth, like the tiniest, most minuscule flicker. Smaller than Tinkerbell. Originally, the Salem Harbor did come close to what is currently the cemetery, until sections of the city were filled in, and there are some tunnels underneath Salem. However, the rest is such complete and utter ridiculousness that historians are adamant it isn't true. But there's only one way to find out. Who wants to go on a road trip to Salem with me to go tunnel hunting? My car has room for plenty of people, trust me. Number 2, the bodies under the witch house. So remember when I mentioned Jonathan Corwin just a few moments ago? Yeah, that's about to come into play again. So when the Corwin house, aka Jonathan's house, was moved back in the 1940s to accommodate the widening of the street, underneath the original hearth were several bones. These were thought to be hidden bodies, and the town was in an uproar over the hidden corpses in the basement of the witch house. And if we're going off of information based on the legend, it would make sense with the whole secret dungeon of George's. This legend actually has the most historical fact behind it, as there was indeed a newspaper article about bones found under the witch house, along with a shocking headline and gruesome photo to accompany it. Sadly, or well, I guess not sadly for humans, just sadly for the purpose of sensationalism, the reality behind that headline is a little more mundane. It was common at the time of building said house, around the 1640s, to bury meat or bones underneath the cooking hearth in order to promote plentiful food for its inhabitants. Even if this wasn't the case, since I know we all like to poke holes into thin theories, the odds of charred bones from various meals over the past 300 years finding their way into the ashes and under added bricks isn't really unlikely. And regardless of their origin, the bones discovered were decidedly not human. Apparently a whole boatload of tests were done. So sadly, unlike the Disney urban legend where we found out that there really are human boats on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, this one might be bunk. As a side note to this entry, there are no official cases of witchcraft trial victims being brought to the Corwin house for examination. While Corwin may have heard original accusations in his parlor, the odds of him being willing to bring an accused witch into his home, with his family and descendants, are astronomically against it. Dang it all though, I like when my theories are right. Number 1, the Seven Gables Secret Stairs. The House of the Seven Gables, which is also known as the Turner House or Turner Ingersoll Mansion, is a 1668 colonial mansion in Salem, Massachusetts, named for its gables. It was made famous by Nathaniel Hawthorne's 1851 novel, The House of the Seven Gables, and is now a non-profit museum. The earliest section of the House of the Seven Gables was built in 1668 for Captain John Turner and remained in his family for 3 generations, descending from John Turner II to John Turner III. You get the idea. Facing south towards Salem Harbor, it was originally a 2-room, 2.5-story house with a projecting front porch and a massive central chimney, but nowadays that portion forms the middle of the house. 4 windows of the original ground room floor, which became a dining room, remain in the house's side wall, and a few years after the original build, a kitchen lean-to and a new north kitchen L to the rear of the house were added. By 1676, Captain Turner had added a spacious front extension with its own chimney, containing a parlor on the ground floor with a large bedchamber above it. Ceilings in this new wing are higher than the very low ceilings in older parts of the house, and it featured double basement windows and an overhang with carved pendants. It was all capped with a 3-gabled garret. In the first half of the 18th century, John Turner II remodeled the house in the New Georgian style, adding wood paneling and sash windows. These alterations are preserved as very early examples of Georgian decor. The House of the Seven Gables is one of the oldest surviving timber-framed mansion houses in continental North America, with 17 rooms and over 8,000 square feet, including its large cellars. So for as long as people have been giving and taking tours of the House of the Seven Gables, the story has gone that the secret staircase of the house was used for just about everything, from smuggling freed slaves through the Underground Railroad to hiding secret lovers for midnight trysts. Sadly, it's just a set of servant stairs. So back when servants were in common usage, these stairs and passages were just as common, since it was considered unseemly for the servants to be in public view. They were meant to be invisible, spiriting into rooms to make them tidy without anybody noticing them. Ergo, hidden stairs and passageways were built to make it easy for them to access areas without meeting the gentry in the main halls and stairs. They're pretty common in older grand places. Locations like Casa Loma jump to mind for me, since they have one behind like a fireplace or something, if my memory's correct. Apparently in recent years there has been some debate over whether the staircase would have been part of the original or later period structure, as it was part of a rebuild by a famous colonial revivalist architect by the name of Joseph Chandler at the direction of Caroline Emerton in 1909. It absolutely fits with the design of servant stairs though, that are seen in many similar structures. And gosh dang, here I was hoping for another home on the same level of spooky as the Winchester Mystery House over in California. Now that's a home with the most random additions with no meaning, all meant to hopefully appease spirits. Number 5. Did rye bread cause the witch hunts? According to my research, this is apparently the most common bizarre myth in all of Salem. So ergot is a fungus blight that forms hallucinogenic, fun stuff in bread, causing its victims to appear bewitched when actually they're just higher than a kite. The victims of ergot might suffer paranoia and hallucinations, twitches and spasms, cardiovascular trouble, and stillborn stuff. This particular fungus thrives in a cold winter followed by a wet spring and seriously weakens the immune system. Human poisoning due to the consumption of rye bread made from ergot-infected grain was actually pretty common in Europe back in the Dark Ages. The first mention of a plague of gangrenous ergotism in Europe comes from Germany back in 857, and following this, France and Scandinavia experienced similar outbreaks. England is notably absent from the historical regions affected by ergotism since its main source of food was wheat, which is resistant to ergot fungi. Back in 944, a massive outbreak of ergotism caused 40,000 deaths in the regions of Aquitaine, Limousin, Périgord, and Angoumois in France. The theory of ergot poisoning is that it grew on the rye that the colonists of Salem used to make their bread. The ergot would have had that LSD-like effect that caused the inhabitants to see and hear things that weren't there, thus causing the bizarre hallucinations, which caused over 250 people to be accused of witchcraft. The origins of this legend started in 1976 when Linda R. Caporiel wrote a paper entitled Ergotism, the Satan Loosed in Salem? It was publicly dismissed by Stephen Nissenbaum, a historian and co-author of Salem Possessed, and over the years dozens of experts have weighed in and found the basis for this theory lacking in anything resembling convincing. For starters, at the time the custom was for all bread to be served toasted, as Puritans generally believed that untoasted bread caused stomach problems, which would have helped to kill off any ergot that survived baking. Also, one of the most common side effects besides hallucinations was gangrene and necrotism of the extremities. If this was happening during a time when every single instance of perceived witchcraft was being documented, and dozens of people were so affected by this, ergot poisoning that they were having hallucinations, someone would have documented that, the other symptoms were happening as well. And to my knowledge, the other symptoms weren't as common. Number 4, the ghost of Sheriff George Corwin. So while I've done my best to try and leave the witches themselves off of today's list, since I did promise y'all legends that weren't the trials, you might have picked up by now that most of the legends revolve around the history of the trials in one way or another. There's no escaping it, so make sure you're still buckled up and enjoy. Sheriff Corwin was the most infamous and brutal when it came to interrogating and handling accused witches back in the day, earning himself a nickname for his heinous methods of torment. Oh, you want to know what the nickname was? Well, sadly, I'm not allowed to say it thanks to interweb rules, but it involved hands around necks and lack of air. A building called the Joshua Ward House now stands on top of the land where George lived and died, and many people say that they've seen him in the windows or even felt his hands pressing down around their necks when they're inside the space. In terms of lineage, he was the nephew of witchcraft trials judge and witch house owner Jonathan Corwin. He's most famously known for the case of Giles Corey, who endured peine forte et dure, or a pressing of stones upon his chest for 3 days, while Sheriff Corwin repeatedly asked him to enter an official plea before his God and country, which Corey had refused to do so in court. According to the legend, George was so sadistic and enjoyed tormenting folks so much that he had a secret dungeon below his home, where he could carry out his fiendish desires whenever he wished. Now that we have the legend part of this out of the way, time to consult the history books for the factual side of things. The actual cases of George tormenting the accused are documented, but are far fewer than have actually been attributed to him. In the case of Giles Corey, who had pleaded innocent but refused to use the official phrasing, likely to delay proceedings and cause trouble for the court and judges that he was furious with, his punishment was technically illegal by the original Massachusetts law. The Body of Liberties Act of 1641 forbade extreme harm, and while the Body of Liberties was officially replaced by the Provincial Charter in 16 1691, aka the year the witchcraft hysteria began, it was still very much upheld in spirit during this time, and George performing these acts was not seen as appropriate. It may have even led to Governor Phipps, paying more attention to the trials and to disband the court of Oyer and Terminer that he himself had set up. Also, if he had actually had his own personal dungeon for illegal bad things, there would have had to have been multiple cover-ups, and there isn't really proof of that during a time when everything was documented. At the end of the day, there isn't proof he did, or didn't, so let me know in the comments where you stand on this.
Number 3. The Terra Nova Ghosts. Back in the 19th century, everyone wanted to be that first crew to be able to get to the South Pole. The North Pole, we had that all figured out. We know all about Kris Kringle. But the South Pole was a land of opportunity and possibility. I guess we didn't know yet it was mostly just snow and ice and not much else. One Robert Falcon Scott, and wow, Falcon is a good middle name, was determined to be that first explorer to break boundaries. And in 1911, Robert Falcon Scott took a crew out on an expedition called the Terra Nova Expedition. The ship would make landfall a little later that year on the Ross Dependency, a nice little chunk of the frozen wasteland south of New Zealand. He and his team set up camp on the Great Ice Barrier, and while some crew would stay behind to look after the camp, find food and shelter, unloading sled dogs, ponies, and they built a hut with quilted insulation, while everybody else would venture forward to go towards that South Pole. However, things would not go quite as they had planned. You see, a rival explorer had already got to the South Pole about a month before Scott made it. One Roald Edmondson had already planted a black flag in the ice. Scott's crew were completely defeated and crestfallen, months and months of freezing labor, and they had absolutely nothing to show for it. History doesn't care about the second guy to get to the South Pole. A defeated Scott and the 4 men he took past the hut began a journey backwards, but it would prove treacherous. The men were already weak in spirits and started to fall to the elements. One by one, frostbite, gangrene, and starvation would take them. Scott would record one last journal entry in 1912. It's a bit harrowing, to be honest. Take a listen to this. Every day we have been ready to start for our depot 11 miles away, but outside the door of the tent it remains a scene of whirling drift. I do not think we can hope for any better things now. We shall stick it out to the end, but we are getting weaker of course, and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write any more. Signed, R. Scott. Last entry. And for God's sakes, look after our people. Like the rest of his crew, Scott would ultimately be taken by the Antarctic. Scott's hut still stands in the Antarctic to this day, and those who've been say they feel the unease standing there, as if there's something wrong in the air. And some have even gone so far as to say they felt like they could hear the voices, chattering teeth, and suffering of the men still freezing away from the cold all these years later. Number 2. Outpost 31. Working at a research station in Antarctica can't be easy. First of all, you gotta deal with the frozen conditions, being locked up with a bunch of other people for months at a time, isolated from the rest of the world, and being on one would be haunting enough without the threat of your coworkers going mad and attacking you. Take a listen to the story of Outpost 31, a now abandoned American research station where its entire crew went missing, presumed dead, and to date, no one really knows what happened. Outpost 31 was a research station located in, well, you guessed it, Antarctica, harboring 11 researchers, including one helicopter pilot, who were stationed there for the year of 1982. It was a fairly routine assignment, and all of the men involved were seasoned and no stranger to the conditions. A similar outpost maintained by a Norwegian research crew was the only sign of life nearby, which was also abandoned under similar circumstances. The only survivor seeming to be a wandering sled dog from the Norwegian station, which eventually made its way to Outpost 31 and was taken in by one Richard Clark, who was in charge of handling the sled dogs at Outpost 31. There isn't a whole lot of information available outside of a few diaries kept on computers from some of the researchers, but it was believed among the men that the dog they had brought in had been carrying some sort of foreign pathogen, some thing that had infected the men and their water and food supply, as shortly after this, there were reports of the men acting aggressive to each other, paranoid, distrusting, violent, and delusional. A log from the lead physician on the station showed that he had become so paranoid that this new novel virus they had let in would destroy the world if it breached containment, and the men had imposed themselves into a quarantine in an attempt to contain it, and eventually succumbed to madness. June 25th, 1982 was the last time anyone made any contact with Outpost 31. An SOS beacon was sent out, But when the rescue had arrived, they were shocked to discover smoldering remnants of the station. The outpost had been badly demolished, burnt, and several of the men had been found dead in brutal conditions, torn apart by wounds that didn't look like anything a human could have done. Some bodies were recovered, but concerningly, a majority of them had been completely lost with no signs whatsoever what had happened to them. But perhaps most bizarrely was the bodies found of the helicopter pilot and the chief mechanic, which were both found slumped over, frozen over, holding a bottle between them, suggesting the two men had accepted their fate and just waited for it to come. Number 1. The Ross Station crash. Now this might be hard to imagine since we tend to exclusively think of Antarctica as a barren wasteland inhabited exclusively by penguins, but at one point in time it was actually a fairly popular destination for tourists to check out. Tourists would buy tickets for a day trip flight from New Zealand, would get treated to a delightful view of the barren frozen wasteland inhabited exclusively by penguins. It is kind of that. It was an exciting opportunity for people to get to see something that was previously thought unreachable. However, flights over Antarctica were not easy. The weather proves challenging, and visibility is very difficult, especially if there's any inclement weather. As well, because of the landscape, it can be very difficult for pilots to navigate with landmarks. Well, one such flight would suffer from all of these problems. It was 1979, and a flight carrying 257 passengers would be flying over Antarctica on a routine trip. Now, there were some issues. The crew staff in this particular flight were very inexperienced, and none of the pilots had ever flown along this flight path before. As well, data in the flight log was wrong, suggesting that there'd be okay visibility, but the day was plagued by low visibility. This, combined with the inexperienced pilots, made for a tragic combination, as the plane would crash into the side of Mount Erebus at 300 miles per hour, instantaneously ending the lives of every single person on the plane, all 257 of them. The remains of the passengers were taken to McMurdo Station, another American research station where they were cremated. Years onwards, researchers stationed at McMurdo have reported that they've heard strange things. Listen to this one report. As soon as I'd entered, I felt something was weird. I took a couple steps and the hair on top of my head stood on end. Footsteps upstairs where there shouldn't have been. Undeniably, there were footsteps above me. A slow cadence of footsteps. I froze up. Whew. Sends a chill down your spine, doesn't it? I should have been making spine chill puns this whole video. Number 5. Deception Island. There's a place in Antarctica called Deception Island, which does not even remotely sound like a place I would have any interest in visiting, because it sounds kinda evil, haunted, or at the very least intentionally misleading. Deception Island was once used as a whaling operation in the early 19th century, where whales were brought in to be harvested and processed, and as such, it's littered with the remains of the mighty creature's bones and carcasses. Unfortunately, in the early 19th century, Avatar: The Way of Water hadn't yet been released, so none of the whalers knew that whaling was bad, and they kept doing it. Maybe it's just the name, or maybe it's the reputation as an abandoned whaling station littered with macabre souvenirs of Earth's biggest mammal, but there have been all sorts of stories and rumors about Deception Island, that something or someone is still living there. Perhaps it's the spirit of the whales themselves. The whaling station was abandoned during the Great Depression and eventually found a new life, being repurposed as a British base during the Second World War. The station still stands alongside the vats where the whale fat was once burned, but it's all rusted over and lost to time. Recently, a paranormal investigation crew made the cold trek out to Deception Island to check out what the hubbub was about and experienced all manner of suspicious activity. The crew noted that when they visited the island, immediately they could see light orbs all around them and see strange shadowy apparitions, and reported hearing strange voices speaking to them, but in a language that nobody could make out. It didn't sound like any modern language. Now, in some cultures, whales are considered very important animals, even some cultures considering them as sacred. Who is to say that a ghost could only manifest as human? There's been reported stories of animal ghosts before, and considering how much suffering there must have been there and how profoundly emotional whales are, it does seem possible that the spirits of the whales are still calling out there to this day. And if you're looking for more scary urban legends, cryptids, aliens, and just about everything else freaky under the sun, baby, look no further. Top 5 Scary's got all you're looking for and then some. Take a click through, subscribe, and enjoy. Number 4. The Ghost Ship. Speaking of non-humanoid entities, let's talk about one of my absolute favorite dinner conversation topics: Ghost ships. Back in the era of exploration, the South Pole was a treacherous pass, and countless explorers would sail their last expedition around the Antarctic. One such ship would be a schooner, the Jenny. Not much is known about the Jenny, the purpose of its original mission, or who was sailing on it. What we know of the Jenny mostly comes from when it was found, when it was discovered by a whaling ship in the year 1860. The whaling ship, the Hope, was sailing through when the spotter saw a battered, beaten, but somehow still sailing schooner passing narrowly through the gap between two icebergs. The crew of the Hope closed on in, looking to make contact, recognizing the English flag atop the mast, and assuming the ship was in grave danger. They sailed forward. There appeared to be 7 men standing on the deck, although they looked gravely underdressed for the weather. It wasn't until the Hope sailed close enough that the crew realized the men they were looking at on the Jenny weren't the crew, but nothing more than frozen remains. The men had been flash frozen solid, as if it had happened in an instant. They appeared to be in mostly good condition, not really showing signs of decomposition or anything. The Hope's captain, one Captain Brighton, boarded the Jenny to try and understand just what had happened. He went underneath the docks and found a man slumped over sitting on a barrel, a journal in his hands. Brighton went up to wake him, but immediately realized, like all of the others, he was frozen completely solid in place. He pried the journal out of his hands to read the last entry. May 4th. 1823. No food for 71 days. I am the last one still alive. If this log was to be believed, then that would mean the crew had been sailing as corpses aimlessly for decades, preserved as if not a day had passed. A real-life ghost ship. Captain Brighton took the journal with him to return it back home. Tragically, the wife of the Jenny's captain was found dead in the bedroom cabin alongside their dog. The Hope sailed off with nothing more than the journal in hand and left the Jenny idly floating across the frozen water, where she still may be to this day. Or perhaps she's plunged deep beneath the icy water. Hopefully those men got to find some peace. And oh man, I hope they found some food wherever they are.
In third place, we have the loup-garou. The traditional tales about the loup-garou are found in French, Canadian, and European folklore, and tend to pop up in, smaller Quebecois towns. So yes, I'm technically cheating out of bias, but I hope you will all forgive me. The loup-garou is also called lycanthrope or werewolf, and is generally believed to be a person who can change into animal form, often, as a wolf. In French Canadian folklore, the loup-garou is believed to be a cursed man, often guilty of not being a good Christian. For example, people who did not confess during Easter could be cursed to become werewolves, and the spell could last for as long as 101 days. It would take hold of the victim every evening, and they would be forced to wander the countryside in animal form. The spell might be broken if someone recognized the individual well transformed and could draw scarlet elixir from them. Neither person could speak of the incident though, for fear of, worse reprisals. The legend varies regionally, with some werewolves able to change any time, but in most variations, as history puts it, all are thirsty beasts who cannot control their lust for killing people and animals. And the full moon, aspect of the legend may have some truth to it. According to a study concluded at the Calvary Mater Newcastle Hospital in Australia, a full moon can bring out the beast in many humans. The study found that out of 91 violent and acute behavioral incidents at the hospital from August of 08 to July of 09, 23% took place on the night of a full moon. Now, amongst youngins in Quebec, loup-garou is also a fun game to be played, and I personally learned it at Comte des Brouillards, which was a French science camp. All you need is a notepad, a pen, and a group of about a dozen or so people to play with, and let's see if I remember all the characters. So, obviously there's the loup-garou who kills people, a narrator, someone who plays like the witness to his killings but is killed if caught, the chasseur who is determined to kill the loup, the sorcière who has the power to save or kill someone or do nothing, Cupidon who chooses 2 players to be lovers, so if one of the lovers is killed, the other one dies as well, the voyante who can choose a person and look at their card, but cannot say outright if they know who a werewolf is, a voleur who can switch their, little cards with somebody else, and everyone else are peasants. Hey, I got it! The goal of the game is to kill the loup-garou, or keep going till everyone is dead. Kinda morbid, but right up my alley. In second place, we have Screaming Jenny. A gentle, kindly woman named Jenny lived alone along the B&O Railroad in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, in a small shed for shelter. She'd fallen on hard times, and with no family to protect her, she was forced to find work where she could, and take whatever shelter was available to someone with little money. Jenny never had enough to eat, and in the winter months, her tiny fire barely kept her alive during the cold months. Still, she kept her spirits up and tried to help other folks when they took sick or, needed food, sometimes going without herself so that, another could eat. Really sweet. One cold evening in late autumn, Jenny sat shivering over her fire, drinking broth out of a wooden bowl when a spark flew from the fire and lit her skirts on fire. She didn't really notice her flaming clothes until the fire had burned through the heavy wool of her skirt and began to, scorch her skin. Leaping up in terror, Jenny threw her broth over the licking flames, but that did nothing. So in terror, she fled from her shack and ran along the tracks, screaming for help as the flames engulfed her body. The station wasn't too far away, and instinctively Jenny made a run for it, hoping to find anybody to help her. Within moments though, her body was a glowing inferno and she was overwhelmed by pain. Her screams grew more horrible as her steps slowed, and she staggered blindly onto the tracks just west of the station, a ball of fire at this point that barely looked human. In her agony, she didn't really see the headlights of a train rounding the curve or hear the screech of the brakes as the engineer spotted her fire-eaten figure and tried to stop. So a moment later, her terrible screams broke off as the train motored down. Alerted by the whistle, the crew from the station came running as the engineer halted the train and ran back down the tracks towards poor, now dead Jenny, who was still burning. The men doused the fire and carried her body back to the station, and she was given a funeral and buried in an unmarked grave in the local churchyard. But within a few days, another poverty-stricken family had moved into her shack, and she was forgotten. Until a month later, when a train rounding that same bend west of the station was confronted by a screaming ball of fire. So too late to stop, the engineer plowed over the glowing figure before he could bring the train to a screeching halt. Leaping from the engine, he ran back down the tracks to search for, like a mangled, burning body, but there was nothing there. So he brought his train into the station and reported the incident to the station master. And after hearing this tale, that guy remembered poor dead Jenny and realized that her ghost had returned to haunt the tracks where she had died. To this day, the phantom of screaming Jenny still appears on the tracks on the anniversary of the day she died. Many an engineer has rounded that curve just west of the station and found himself face to face with the burning ghost, as once more she makes her deadly run towards the station, trying to find someone to save her. Poor Jenny. In first place, we have Slaughterhouse Canyon. So, when the first white settlers found the area that we're about to talk about, the area was named Luana's Canyon, after the matriarch of the impoverished family who lived, in a small wooden shack near that area in the heart of the canyon. As one might expect, living in a small shack in the desert, not so good. One miner, notably this big dreamer, he wanted to be able to provide a better life for his wife, Luana, and their kiddos, and would regularly venture off into the mountains to work in the gold mines and to search for food for his family. So he would set off to the northwestern mountains on his trusty mule, but different accounts of the story can't really agree on whether he left home every 2 weeks or if he was gone for 2 weeks at a time. Regardless of how often he was away from his home, his family's only source of food, money, and supplies was what he could bring back with him. Luana and her wards could consistently expect the miner to return with what they needed for their comfort and survival. One fateful day, the miner kissed his wife and, wards goodbye and was on his way. But unfortunately, that was the last time they would see their dad. Days turned into weeks, and soon Luana began to worry that something had, happened to her husband. As the supplies dwindled, her concern that her husband had fallen ill, had an accident, or worse, kinda came to be. The miner had seemingly become another tragic victim of the unforgiving gold rush, but Luana kind of relied on her husband's consistency, so she didn't really ration any of the supplies that her husband had brought back on his last trip. So when food and supplies ran scarce, the family began to starve. So living alone in the canyon meant the family had no other possible means of support, and soon her wards began to wither and wept in pain. Despite being pale and weak with starvation, their screams and cries echoed throughout the canyon and even traveled on the nighttime breeze. The starving sobs of her dependents, constantly begging Luana for food, began to tear her down mentally. Each day that went by pushed Luana closer to the brink of insanity, until one day she could no longer stand to see them suffer and she snapped. One night, during a thunderstorm, tormented by their screams and her own, agonizing hunger, she put on her wedding dress and slaughtered her own wards to end their suffering. Her mind, gone, she chopped their dead bodies up into several pieces, splattering the walls of the small shack with, red fluid, which earned it the name of, slaughterhouse. After finishing her horrible deed, she carried the pieces and tossed the remains into the river. Afterwards, she collapsed into a heap, her wedding dress, soaked in the redness of those she had slain. Luana was overcome with sadness and guilt, and she remained on the riverbank, wailing and screaming over what she had done until she succumbed to starvation herself the next morning. So ever since, people have reported sounds of wailing throughout the canyon at night, and warned newcomers not to try and protect what could sound like, young screams, or else risk meeting their own end. In fifth place, time to meet Mercy Brown. So in the 1800s Rhode Island, people believed that tuberculosis was caused by the dead consuming their surviving family members. And how did they deal with it? Well, they would dig up the remains of the dead and burn the bodies. So, the villagers of Exeter, Rhode Island knew that Farmer George Brown had a problem or a curse. Firstly, in 1883, his wife, Mary, succumbed to a mysterious illness. 6 months later, his 20-year-old daughter, Mary Olive Brown, also fell ill and died. But then the next several years, his 19-year-old daughter, Mercy, was also dead, and George's teenage son, Edwin Brown, a healthy guy who worked as a store clerk, suddenly became frail and sick. So the village doctor informed George that consumption was taking his family, but the locals they knew better. On a chilly March afternoon in 1892, a group of men entered Exeter's Chestnut Hill Cemetery and exhumed the bodies of George Brown's wife and 2 daughters. They had concluded that one of the deceased was leaving the grave at night to suck the life out of its relatives, and only by killing the vampire could young Edwin be saved. So first, the men examined the bodies of Mrs. Brown and daughter Mary. Finding them to be properly decomposed, they began to exhume Mercy, and when they reached the corpse, they suddenly leapt back in terror. Mercy, who had been buried for more than 2 months, appeared oddly well preserved. It appeared that her hair and nails had grown, and when the men cautiously prodded the corpse with their shovel, they found it was filled with fresh red fluid. The suspected vampire's heart was removed and then burned on a nearby rock. The ashes were added to young Edwin's medicine, but poor boy still passed away like 2 months later. Oh, not even. Rhode Island became known as the vampire capital of America. South County, whose isolated villages resembled the lonely hamlets of Transylvania, was a hotbed of vampire rumors between 1870 and 1900. When Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula in 1897, died, newspaper accounts of vampire Mercy Brown were found in his vials. And the legend persists to this day. The Rhode Island Historical Cemetery No. 2 stands the gravestone of alleged vampire Nellie L. Vaughan of West Greenwich, who died in 1889 at the age of 19, and that grave is supposedly cursed. One local university professor who studied vampirism claimed that no vegetation would grow on Nellie's grave, despite numerous attempts to plant there, and people are still taken aback by the inscription along the bottom of the tombstone. The curious words read, "I am waiting and watching for you." Now, while this all might be terrifying to some, I personally love hanging out with vampires, and technically, I do have a vampire for an older brother, so honestly, I might just text him later to plan a road trip. In 4th place, time to travel to Dudleytown. So Dudleytown is an abandoned settlement located in a valley known as Dark Entry Forest in northwestern Connecticut in the United States, and is best known today as, technically a ghost town, but bear with me here. The population of Dudleytown was never large, and according to an 1854 map, the peak number of families who lived here only reached about 26. Since the mid-20s, the land occupied by the village has been maintained by philanthropists as a private land trust, who worked to reforest the land after decades of agricultural use. A couple of traces, such as cellar holes, do remain of the original village. Due to the rumors of ghost activity, though, beginning in the 1980s, the village site has been subject to frequent vandalism, and the owners have since, closed the land to the public. Locals refer to it as a dark vortex, and rumor has it that if any visitor steals an artifact from the area, they will have a horrible curse put on them. Additionally, visitors have reported seeing orbs of light, wolfish black shadows, and hearing disembodied voices. A local rumor that has been frequently shared alleges the founders of Dudleytown were descended from Edmund Dudley, an English nobleman who was beheaded for treason during the reign of Henry VIII. Sometimes I always have to check with those Roman numerals, eh? From that moment on, the Dudley family was placed under a curse, which followed them across the Atlantic to America. So this curse is blamed for instances of crop failures and mental illness, as well as several violent deaths in the village. Another bizarre tragedy affected one of the most famous residents of the region, General Herman Swift, who had served in the Revolutionary War under George Washington. In 1804, his wife, Sarah Fay, was struck by lightning while standing on the front porch of their home near Dudleytown and died instantly. The general went insane and died soon afterwards. Local records indicated 3 people went insane in the space of less than half a century, which is wild to me when you consider just how small the population is. Could something be in the air?
In at number 3, we have Cropsey. In the mid-90s, Ariel Abramowitz went to camp across from the notorious disused mental institution Willowbrook in Staten Island. She recalls counselors taking campers to an old building on the site, with something like blood smeared on the walls. They spooked them with tales of a boogeyman named Cropsey. Allegedly, he was a respected community member. He has a family and a child who he loved. One summer, he sent his child to the local camp. His son was later confirmed to have died at the camp. This sent the man mad. He disappeared from his life. No one knew where he had gone, but before he left, he vowed to get revenge on the other kids and campers. He was later found and taken to a mental hospital. The next time we would hear of him, he was described as a homicidal madman, an escaped mental patient with a hook for a hand who hunted children and dragged them back to the tunnel system that lay under the abandoned ruins of the old Seaview Hospital, a former tuberculosis sanitarium. Soon the urban legend would be unmasked as Andre Rand. Rand worked as a janitor at the Willowbrook State School on Staten Island, a place whose name alone has the power to frighten adults and children alike. The institution, built as a respite for children with intellectual disabilities, was revealed to be a living hell in the 1970s, although authorities wouldn't close the school until 1987. Rand had a long rap sheet of crimes against children. In 1983, he went to jail again after kidnapping a bus full of kids from the local YMCA and driving them to an airport. And though there wasn't enough physical evidence to charge him, police already suspected him in the disappearances of at least 4 other Staten Islanders. To this day, none of the bodies have been found. Rand's story and that of Cropsey continues to fascinate and horrify tri-state residents to this day. Coming in at number 2, we have Haunted Dakota. The Dakota building set the standard for Upper West Side apartment living, built at a time when the upper classes were only just becoming familiar with the concept of living in an apartment. It was known for having famous artists as residents, and the board were very picky about who they allowed to live there. One of the most famous couples to live at the Dakota was John Lennon and his wife Yoko Ono. Years after John Lennon was shot dead in front of his Central Park West apartment building, the Dakota, his widow Yoko Ono saw his ghost sitting at his white piano. She claims he turned to her and said, "Don't be afraid, I'm still with you." When he was alive, Lennon himself claimed to have spotted a figure wandering the halls of the Dakota, whom he referred to as the Crying Lady Ghost. Other residents are said to have encountered the spectre of a little girl about 7 years old, smiling and laughing and greeting people in the hallways. The Dakota's original owner, Edward Clark, had an interest in the paranormal and would often host seances to communicate with the dead. The more you play with the paranormal, the more likely you are to experience paranormal activity in the future, says paranormal researcher. She believes that when people are murdered suddenly and violently, their spirits linger. In John Lennon's case, his life was cut short in his prime. He was only 40 years old. Someone like him was happy to be alive. He was working, he had a small child, he had unfinished business. It's a prime recipe for a classic haunting. And finally, in at number 1, we have mole people. There are around 700 miles of subway tracks underneath New York City. Did you know that the large sections of the track that isn't used is home to the mole people? Thousands of homeless people and families have created a community underground. The mole people are living under popular parts of town without the people who are walking above even knowing they are there. They travel under cover of darkness as not to be evicted from their underground homes. Ever since the Great Depression, there have been many homeless people in New York City. During the difficult period, people started using the subway tunnels as a place to live. The places where homeless people live are dangerous. Rodents and reptiles lurk through the tunnels. There are debris and other hazards in the dark, plus the darkness conceals criminals, and mole people are often the victims of attacks. Thieves even steal what little they have. The entrances to the subway tunnels are easily accessible by anyone who has the desire to venture into them. There are numerous entrances throughout the city. However, it is illegal to enter, and going into them can result in criminal charges. Just like any place that numerous people live, the mole people form communities. Most of them look after each other, but there is also a kind of hierarchy. Most of them are very territorial over the section of the tunnels where they live. After all, it is their home. There are couples and even families that live underground. The sad part is these people risk losing their kids if authorities find out they do not have a place to live. So the families living in the subway do their best to stay concealed. People are not the only ones living in the subway tunnels under New York City though. Many animals live beneath the streets. Some of the mole people even domesticate these animals and live with them. These animals keep them company in the very isolated and lonely place they call home. The mole people do anything they can to eat and obtain the things they need. It's difficult for them though. They have to wait until it's dark to emerge from their homes. If authorities see them, they risk getting in trouble. Throughout the years, the city has made efforts to clean sections of the subway tunnels. However, the task is so vast that many abandoned areas remain untouched, especially the parts of the system that are no longer in use. As the saying goes, out of sight, out of mind. In at number 5, we have Empire State Building Bermuda Triangle. We've all heard about the Bermuda Triangle. Also known as the Devil's Triangle, it is loosely defined as being a region in the western part of the North Atlantic Ocean. A number of aircraft and ships are said to have disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Since then, planes changed their flight path to avoid the triangle. Others avoid going anywhere near it altogether. But did you know New York has its own version of the Bermuda Triangle? It is located in Midtown, more specifically a large radius around the Empire State Building. Starting in 2008, drivers started to complain about the 5-block radius around the Empire State. Their cars would inexplicably die and refuse to start up again. It was almost every day, says Ronnie Yakubovich, manager of NYC Tire and Auto Care. He went on to explain that he would pick up the cars and tow them outside of the radius, and they would suddenly start to work as normal. His best guess is that the radio signals from the broadcast beacon on the tower were disabling alarm systems in cars and preventing them from starting. But if that was so, why did this only start in 2008? The Empire State Building was opened in 1931, so why did this start so recently? I guess we'll never know what is causing the phenomenon, maybe just avoid the area if you can. In at number 4, Super Rats of Hurricane Sandy. One New Yorker told the story of him and his roommates. They had lived peacefully in a 5th floor loft for years with barely a cockroach invading the space. Then, the winter after Hurricane Sandy, the noises began, scratching and scurrying. I walked into the kitchen one day and saw a rat the size of a small cat crawling across our food shelves, Kevin says. Traps and an exterminator proved ineffective. It was baffling that the rats would find their way to the 5th floor. Then the roommates read reports about rats fleeing inland from flooded subway tunnels after Hurricane Sandy. A theory was going around that the weaker rats were wiped out and the surviving rodents bred a new generation of tougher, meaner super rats. There are reports of super rats even today. Some businesses demand that the city steps in and does something as outside dining became more normal within the last year. The diners were being harassed by the giant rats. Many diners have had to leave due to the dangerous nature of the giant animals. They claimed the rats were getting increasingly hungry with the lack of tourism, leaving them with less to feed off on the streets. The city continues to claim that these super rats do not exist despite the number of sightings and photos of the giant rodents. Many live in fear that the rats might make their way into the apartments as they are harder to kill than the usual infestation.
Number 3, the spider bite. Now this is one of my absolute favorites. I remember being told this one at a schoolyard when I was just a fledgling ghoulie. The story goes that a woman from frigid northern England, where the sun simply doesn't shine, takes a vacation to somewhere nice and sunny to soak up some rays and take a break from the dreariness of Leeds. Usually it's Mexico, so she journeys to Guadalajara. The woman, while sunbathing, is bitten by a spider without noticing. Days pass and the spider bite grows inflamed and red. She seeks out a local doctor who dismisses it as nothing more than a spider bite and tells her that it'll settle itself in a matter of days and she has nothing to worry about and should just enjoy her vacation. She continues on her vacation but notices with each passing day that the bite on her cheek is growing slightly. She complains that it's growing sore and larger, and she returns to the doctor yet again. The doctor tells her if she's truly so worried about nothing but a spider bite, she should just take a hot bath and try to relax and ease her skin. She goes back to a resort, and during the bath, the boil on her face softens and bursts, and hundreds upon hundreds of baby spiders crawl down her face as it was an egg the entire time. Just delightful. Now, some of my ghouls might recognize this particular tale from the collection of haunted stories, scary stories to tell in the dark, made famous by its absolutely wretched illustrations straight out of your childhood nightmares. I'd wager that the charcoal drawing of the spider bite woman left an impact on you the way it did me. This book changed my life, really. I used to actually be a very normal, happy kid. And then I took this out in the 3rd grade from the library, and now I can only talk about ghouls, goblins, ghosts, and grossness. Number 2, Edward Mordrake. Edward Mordrake, as the legend goes, was a young, intelligent, and good-looking noble Englishman and a talented musician. A real Renaissance man. A man with all this going for him surely led a very successful and happy life, right? Well, unfortunately for Mr. Mordrake, he was cursed to bear host to a passenger, otherwise he wouldn't be on this list. Edward Mordrake, more famously known as the man with 2 faces, is said to have been born with a face on the back of his head. It's said that his secondary face was a malignant sort. When Mordrake would cry, his face would smile and sneer. When Mordrake would laugh, it would cry. Mordrake complained bitterly of his twin. He couldn't sleep and suffered from severe insomnia, claiming that the face would whisper to him in the night. It would whisper such things they only speak of in hell. Not quite a comforting bedtime story. Really can't imagine it was too easy sharing a pillow with a fellow like that. He would beg doctors to remove it, but was told repeatedly that it wasn't possible, lest he suffer the consequences, as the two were linked. The nobleman eventually couldn't bear to put up with the suffering anymore, and at the age of 23 was prompted to take his life. He left behind a note demanding that after his death, the face be destroyed and all remnants of it destroyed, for fear that it would follow him into the afterlife. The story of Edward Mordrake has captivated audiences for years, reaching its peak when Mordrake himself featured as a character on the 4th season of American Horror Story, Freak Show. So is there any truth to this, or is it just a tall tale? While no remnants of Mordrake were ever found, nor any written records, solely stories passed down from generation to generation. So whether or not it was real, all we can attest to is just how creepy it was. And number 1, La Llorona, I am so sorry to my viewers, that is definitely not how you pronounce that properly, is one of the most well-known folk legends in Hispanic culture and has been adapted, told, and retold countless times. Let me add one to that pile. No one really knows where the original legend of La Llorona appeared from, although the one connective thread between all versions of the story is that La Llorona is the spirit of a woman who cast her children away into the water and spends the rest of eternity searching for them around rivers and lakes. In some versions of the story, she was betrothed to a wealthy Spaniard who abandoned her, and after being deserted, in a fit of manic rage, she threw her out into the local river. The legend is widespread throughout Mexico and Central and South Americas. The legend goes that you can find her late at night, clad all in a white gown, patrolling around bodies of water. Where it goes from here varies from teller to teller, with some variations of the story saying that she kidnaps lost children, others saying she attacks unfaithful husbands, and some meaner variations reporting that she attacks wantonly at anyone who sees her. Regardless of the local legend, all the stories can agree that when you hear La Llorona crying, you should get away. Now, the story has found its way to several Hollywood movies, TV shows, and more. Anyone else remember that pilot episode of Supernatural? Every couple years, someone takes a new stab at the legend of La Llorona, meaning it's unlikely you'll stop hearing about her crying anytime soon. Just hope the poor girl finds those kids someday. She's been looking for a really long time. Number 5. Polybius. Our first wretched tale is that of Polybius, an arcade game that hungered for a lot more than your quarters. Close your eyes and picture it's 1981. For most of you, myself included, I'm sure that's a little bit before your time, so just picture it's the first season of Stranger Things. It's the summer of 1981. School's out, you've got not a care in the world. Your goals are to kick back, bike around town, and spend your halcyon days popping quarters at the arcade. A new game appears that no one's heard of before, called Polybius. First appearing at an arcade in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, Polybius seems deceptively simple. A game similar to Asteroids, where the player controls a little spaceship firing and geometric shapes and patterns unfurling hypnotically. It's been said that Polybius was addicting, far more than Pac-Man or Dig Dug could ever hope to be. Lines would form around the cabinet, fights over whose turn it was, and kids would go home and complain of nightmares, night terrors, hallucinations, insomnia, and an unhealthy obsession with the game, unable to think or talk about anything else but Polybius. And every few weeks, mysterious men in black suits would visit the arcade, observe people playing Polybius for a bit, write things down in notepads and journals, and leave without speaking to anyone. Polybius was a hit with the locals, with the machine seeing constant use around the clock. As mysteriously as it appeared, a few months later, the cabinet disappeared. Attempts to uncover the truth behind Polybius bring up nothing but questions. The developers, Lachen, is a broken German translation for the words for senses and to delete senses. Records of the company are impossible to find, and no trace of the original cabinet has ever come up. But there are many online who insist that they experienced it in that fateful arcade in Portland many, many years ago. Subscribe if you dare, for we've got top scary content coming to you every day this October, and every day after that too. Number 4. The hands resist him. Take a look at this painting. It's nice, isn't it? No, of course not. If you don't have to agree with me, this thing is terrifying. Even looking at it through a screen makes me feel uneasy. This painting is titled, The Hands Resist Him, but perhaps you know it by its more colloquial name, the Haunted eBay Painting. They can't all have good names. This painting earned its reputation when it was put up for sale on eBay in the early 2000s, with a small disclaimer from the listers warning that while the painting might have a certain allure to it, that you should know it was inhabited by something evil. The listing claimed that the painting would change. The characters would change poses, claiming the girl in the painting would threaten the boy. Those who've seen the painting in person report feelings of great unease, discomfort. Those who saw it when it was briefly displayed in galleries claiming they felt like there was something there with them. Some going so far as to say they felt like there was something around their throat. Take a look at it. I mean, really look at it. Okay, you should probably tab out of the video. I don't want to be responsible for something happening to you. Most concerningly, the painting's first owner and the first person to ever have seen it publicly at its first showing both died under mysterious circumstances. The artist, of course, dismisses these claims as just coincidence, but that's what someone who painted a haunted painting would want you to think. Currently, The Hands Resist Him slumbers in the gallery of Kim Smith in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Originally, Smith had wanted to hang the painting in his own home, but was begged by his family that for their sake, they keep it away. Understandable. The painting has only been made visible to the public 6 times, and each time the viewers have complained of feeling ill. Maybe we should start to move on from this topic before it's too late for us. Number 3, Mokolo Mbembe. Up next on our strange list of urban legends from across the world is going to be that of the cryptid Mokolo Mbembe. A cryptid that was totally new to me until this video, so I hope you are finding out about it too at the same time. There are very few things that make me half as happy as finding out about a new cryptid or a new urban legend that I haven't heard about before, because I read a lot of scary stuff every single day. The Mokolo Mbembe is a creature that is said to inhabit the remote regions of the Congo and is said to resemble a large, semi-aquatic creature sort of looking like a sauropod dinosaur. That's long neck if you're a Land Before Time fan. One of the really long ones. You probably heard it called as a brontosaurus. It's actually an apatosaurus, not to be too paleontology nerdy on the channel, but you know, it's important to get that out there. It looks like any other number of long-necked sauropods is what I'm trying to get across. Looks like a big dinosaur. Luckily, the creature is believed to be herbivorous, feeding on plants and aquatic vegetation. Now, according to local legends, the Mokolo Mbembe is said to inhabit the vast network of rivers, swamps, and dense forests of the Congo. Now, this thing's said to be secretive. Like most cryptids out there, there's very few camera-friendly cryptids, and it rarely reveals itself to humans. However, unlike many stories of cryptids or urban legends on this list or not, the Mokolo Mbembe is not hostile. It's not eating people, it's not attacking people. If you find yourself encountering the Mokolo Mbembe, it's said that you are blessed with good luck and spiritual protection. I mean, obviously, you get to meet a dinosaur. That's like the coolest thing ever. Now, in the past, there have been official expeditions hunting for the creature, but it's hard to nail down due to the dense and inhospitable nature of the Congo. Now, much like Top 5 Scary's favorite, the Megalodon, or the Loch Ness Monster, the Mokolo Mbembe is said to be a long since extinct creature that somehow persisted onwards, or a new species that's eluded classification by science. So what is it? Is it really out there? I hope I can see it someday and be blessed with a bit of spiritual protection from my favorite long neck. Number 2, Akamanto. Up next at our number 2 spot, and it's a very fitting spot at number 2, and you'll see why in a minute, is Akamanto, also known as the Red Cloak. It manifests as a masked Japanese spirit and may very well be one of the most evil and downright strange creatures of folklore and urban myth you will ever hear about, I promise. The creature is a humanoid spirit with a long, flowing red cloak that traditionally has a mask that covers its features. It carries a blade or sometimes a scythe of some kind. Now, there's tons of little local variants in how the Akamanto operates, but there are elements that remain consistent across all tales. First and foremost, the Akamanto's modus operandus. The Akamanto preys on you during your most vulnerable moments. This would-be spiritual assassin comes to slay kings on the porcelain throne. It knocks on the smallest room in the house. This demon comes for you while you're on the toilet, if I can be so blue for a moment. That's why it's the number 2 spot. There you go. Little 3rd grade humor for you. Speaking of blue, that leads into the deadly game you're forced to play. The Akamanto then offers you a sinister choice. It asks the occupant a question, choosing between either red toilet paper or blue toilet paper. It's kind of like that guy from Squid Games offering you the paper. Actually, this is a little fun Top 5 Scary trivia for you. This cryptid is actually what literally inspired that scene in Squid Game. Now, it's a trick question. Neither of these toilet papers that this ghastly spirit has for you are anything like the Royale kittens, okay? The red paper means you will find yourself cut up, leaving behind quite a mess of red. The blue option means you'll be gasping for air, which is clean but slow and painful. This is so funny, but the only way to escape the Akamanto is to tell him that you've got enough toilet paper yourself. And thanks for asking, but you're good. Really, you just have to ignore him, reject his offer, or flush quick and hightail it out of there. You don't play smart with him, you don't ask for purple paper or sandpaper or any wise guy answers, as that's said to lead to the Akamanto dragging you into the underworld, just as long as he doesn't flush you. That's amazing. I love so much that this cryptid, you don't have to do any complicated ritual. You don't have to have some special weapon to fight him. You just have to tell him, no thanks. That's good advice. And number 1, La Llorona. Now, last time you guys made fun of my pronunciation for this, and I would like to inform you that I'm trying to do it better, but I'm almost certainly still doing it wrong. La Llorona, also known as the Weeping Woman, is a haunting legend deeply rooted in Latin American folklore. Perhaps you've heard her story before, on this channel even. She's rather infamous, told and retold, appearing in countless campfire stories, TV, movies. Her tale has captivated generations, scaring us and fascinating us. It's a cautionary tale, warning us of the consequences of disobedience and the dangers of the night. According to the legends, La Llorona was a beautiful woman named Maria who lived in a rural village. She fell in love with a wealthy nobleman and had a family with him. However, the nobleman abandoned her for a younger woman, shattering Maria's heart. Oh, Maria, baby. Nobleman will do that to you. Consumed by grief and anger, Maria drowned her family, except for her husband, in a fit of madness, realizing too late the enormity of her actions. Overwhelmed by guilt and remorse for what she had done, she cast herself into the water and took her own life. But her spirit was denied afterlife, and she was condemned to wander the earth for eternity. She's often described as a spectral figure dressed all in white, her face obscured by either a veil of sorrow or her long, black, wet-soaked hair covering over it. She's said to haunt rivers, lakes, other bodies of water, weeping inconsolably as she searches for her lost family she'll never find. Her cries are bone-chilling, a mournful wail that echoes through the night, and whatever you do, if you hear it, you need to ignore it. You need to avoid it. Do not go bothering her. Legend has it that encountering her is basically a guarantee of misfortune. It's said that she looks out for younger people, mistakes them for her own, and drags them away. Many claim to have seen her and heard her cries in the darkness, but if they try to approach, she vanishes. Number 5. Slender Man. One of the more recent and yet prevalent urban legends is that of Marble Hornets' elongated Slender Man. The enigmatic figure is depicted as a tall, gangly, thin entity dressed in a suit and tie with fractally ever-expanding limbs and a blank, featureless humanoid head. Slender Man first reared that featureless head in internet forums and creepypasta stories, but gained incredible popularity and took a life beyond the internet. The legend of Slender Man states that it lurks in the shadows, often in backwoods and rural areas, and preys upon unsuspecting people. He's said to have an array of supernatural abilities, manipulating people's minds, controlling their actions subconsciously, can teleport, appear, and disappear at will. Slender Man is synonymous with strange disappearances, leaving behind trails of unsettling clues. Slender Man is a genuine phenomena, transcending the digital realm and seeping into our real-life consciousness and absorbing up our thoughts. I think it's fascinating that in real time we got to watch this thing that started as an internet project turn into a genuine urban legend that will probably be told and retold for future generations. I feel like that's incredible. You see Slender Man in movies, you've seen Slender Man in tons of video games, you've probably seen all kinds of fan art, cosplay, little merchandise. Slender Man has a fandom rivaling most influencers, and is probably one of the most popular cryptids in the world, and also one of the most infamous. Because there is a very dark turn to Slender Man. When in 2014, 2 girls in Wisconsin carried out an attack on their classmate to please the entity, saying that they had been influenced by him, blending the lines between fiction and reality a bit too uncomfortably for most people's takes. A stark reminder to not take anything you hear on the internet too seriously. And if you're looking for way more scary stories of cryptids and urban legends, well, you don't need to go anywhere else on YouTube because you're in the perfect place for it. We've got a video or two on just about anything freaky you can think of. Hit that subscribe button, click that little bell so you don't miss a scream, but would you kindly do that at the end of this video? Because I got 4 more urban legends I am just itching to tell you all about. Number 4, the Gray Man. Coming up next on our list, we're going to take a quick trip to Europe as we head up to Scotland as we talk about the Gray Man. Up in the mist-shrouded peaks of the Cairngorms, they say there's a spirit out there called the Gray Man, watching over the harsh and treacherous terrain. This spectral entity lurks amidst the craggy slopes and swirling mists, described as a towering figure with an indistinct form. His appearance is shrouded in gray mist that seems to blend with the surrounding landscape, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly glow, looking just a bit like my black cat walking in the darkness getting caught by a flashlight. Some say the Gray Man is made up of the mist itself, precipitation given form in the shape of a being mistaken as as a man. Many mountaineers and hikers who braved the slopes of Ben Macdui have reported scary happenings that could be proof of the Gray Man's presence there. Eerily echoing footsteps, an overwhelming sense of dread taking over the pit of your stomach, and some bold expeditioners even claim that they've seen a glimpse of a towering gray humanoid silhouette watching them as they walk over the mountain. The legends warn you that those who are unfortunate enough to cross paths with the Gray Man will bring unimaginable malfeasance to you and your kin. Should you encounter him, you become disoriented, losing your way to the treacherous slopes or being driven to unspeakable madness from the supernatural powers that he has. Above all else though, what is the Gray Man? Where did the legend come from? Is it a malevolent spirit haunting those who cross into its territory? A guardian protecting the mountains? Whatever it might be, just be cautious walking through Ben Macdui. And if we have any Scottish viewers who have a bit of insight into the Gray Man, I found this legend absolutely fascinating and I would love any information you could share with us.
In at number 3 we have Beast of Bodmin Moor. The Beast of Bodmin Moor is another old urban legend from Britain. It's known that for 3 decades since 1978, a phantom black cat the size of a puma is seen stalking the moors of Cornwall. The Beast of Bodmin Moor has over 60 sightings of eyewitnesses reporting a black panther-like cat, being 3 to 5 feet long and featuring white eyes. Where there are reports of the beast, there was also a trail of mutilated livestock. The evidence was concrete enough that in 1995 the government ordered an official investigation into the existence of such a beast. The report finally concluded that there was no verifiable evidence of a big cat on Bodmin Moor, although it was careful to state that there was no evidence against it either. Shortly after, the report didn't lead anywhere. A small boy found a leopard skull lying on the banks of the River Fowey, thus creating bigger speculation about the beast being real. Sightings continued, and in 1998 there was a video footage released that clearly shows a black cat looking animal that fits the description of the Beast of Bodmin Moor. More recently, in October 2016 near St Austell, there was reported a giant set of paw prints. Some people have reported being chased by the powerful and scary cat-like creature. Others have spotted it in the distance, not quite believing their eyes. Some believe that the animal is a species of wild cat, though extinct in Britain many years ago, still surviving on the moors of Cornwall. Others blame the paranormal, believing the beast to be a mythical spirit of a creature that roamed Cornwall in the past. In at number 2 we have Owlman of Marnon. A remote church in Cornwall is known to be the home of a half-man, half-owl creature that has been terrifying the locals and tourists since the 1920s. Known as the Owlman of Marnon Smith, the creature is a human-sized owl with large wings, long claws and glowing eyes. The first sighting of the Owlman was reported in April 1976, where 2 girls on vacation with their family walked down to the old church. When approaching the remote church, they saw what they described as a terrifying birdman with wings and feathers. The girls were so scared by their encounter with the Owlman that their parents decided to end their vacation early and leave Cornwall immediately. There was another sighting 2 years later. At first the witnesses thought that someone was playing a trick on them, that it was a person dressed up in a costume. Like other reports, they described an abnormally large birdman, silver grey in colour with feathers. They only realised that it wasn't a trick when they saw the creature fly up into the air and disappear. After it flew away, they said that there was a strange static noise coming from the trees for some time afterwards. There was a further sighting in 1989 and then again 6 years later. The witness this time was an American tourist, and she described the Owlman as being around 5 foot tall with huge claws protruding from its vast wings. The most recent sighting was in September of 2009. It was reported that a young girl named Jessica Wilkins saw the Owlman of Marnon for the first time this century. Though with all these sightings near the Marnon church, the Owlman is still a mystery. Some theorize that the church is standing in the center of an ancient earthworks and has an earth energy line passing through the site. The theory suggests natural earth energy could be connected to the reports of the Owlman, but in any case the unsolved case of the Owlman is still a mystery. And finally, in at number 1 we have the Loch Ness Monster. Taking home in Scotland at Loch Ness River, this might be the most well-known urban legend in Britain. The famous legend of the Loch Ness Monster began to gain attraction in 1933. At the time, a road across the Loch Ness was finished, offering an unobstructed view of the lake. The first recorded sighting was in April of the same year, where a couple recalled seeing an enormous animal. They compared the creature that they witnessed to a dragon or prehistoric creature. After it crossed their car's path, it disappeared into the water. In December 1933, the Daily Mail commissioned Marmaduke Wetherall, a hunter, to locate the sea creature. Along the lake shores, he found large footprints that he believed belonged to a very powerful soft-footed animal about 20 feet long. In all reports, the appearance is generally noticed as the same. Common themes attributed to the monster include a large body with at least one hump, a long arched neck, a small head, and being grey or dark brown colour. The Loch Ness area attracted numerous monster hunters. Over the years, several sonar explorations were undertaken to locate the creature, but none were successful. In addition, numerous photographs allegedly showed the beast, but most were discredited as fake or as depicting other animals or objects. That being said, a satellite image on Apple Maps revealed what appeared to be a large creature around 30 meters long just below the surface of Loch Ness on April 19, 2014. This not only generated the usual hype of claims that it was the Loch Ness monster, but also served to comfort those who were upset over the earlier speculation that Nessie had disappeared. And to this day, the creature photographed in this image is unidentified. Even though it's not confirmed, with all the reports and witnesses and the fact that most of the Loch Ness River is still unexplored, it's hard not to believe in the legend of Loch Ness Monster. Coming in at number 5, we have the Big Grey Man. Known as the Big Grey Man of Ben Macdhu in Scottish folklore, this creature is said to haunt the summit of Ben Macdhu. Although there have been many sightings of the Big Grey Man, few have actually seen the creature with their eyes. Rather bizarrely, a couple of witnesses claim the creature wears a top hat, and whenever he appears, the sound of loud crunching footsteps echo across the mountains. Some hear singing, others ghostly laughter. Although there have been many sightings of the Big Grey Man, few have actually seen the creature with their eyes. This is due to the fact that the Grey Man is apparently more often felt than physically seen. Climbers experience uncontrolled terror, deep despair, and huge negative energy. Not surprisingly, many walkers feel an overwhelming desire to run away. Some have felt themselves pursued by echoing footsteps. Others are hypnotically drawn to the edge of cliffs. Those people who actually have witnessed the creature describe it to be very thin and over 10 feet tall, with dark skin, hair, long arms, and broad shoulders. That being said, most often the creature remains unseen in the God of the Mountains. In 1925, Collie Norman was the first recorded witness of the creature, as he recalls a terrifying experience in the face of Big Grey Man. Collie was a hiking enthusiast, professor, and member of the Royal Geographical Society. He reported that as he was returning to the summit, he was surrounded by mist and began to hear noises of footsteps that were not his. The footsteps sounded as if someone was chasing him, with steps 3 or 4 times the length of his own. Collie became extremely frightened and rushed down the hike to get away from the creature that was supposedly following him. After Collie came out with this story, many other hikers shared similar stories of their own encounters with the Big Grey Man, reporting that they as well heard footsteps following them and felt uneasy and a negative energy in the area. While in 1945, a worker, Peter Densham, reported that he heard strange noises while the mist began closing in on his location, and with the added feeling of pressure around his neck. The worker fled the scene before anything else could escalate. Even though there have been only a few eyewitnesses, it's safe to say that wherever the Grey Man ventures, he is accompanied by a sense of irrational panic and dread. In at number 4, we have the Black Shook. Considered the most common urban legend in Britain, we have Black Shook. You can find the Black Shook in the counties of East Anglia, lurking in the graveyards, crossroads, or forests. The Black Shook is described as a large black dog with flaming red eyes. On some accounts, the Black Shook appears to have one eye in the middle of its forehead. The dog varies in size, though has been compared to a large dog to the size of a horse. However, it is generally described as about the size of a mastiff, with shaggy black fur and glowing red eyes. These beasts were known to suddenly appear without warning, then disappear as quickly as they arrived. One of the most notable reports of Black Shook is his appearance at the churches of Bungay and Blythburgh in Suffolk. On August 4th, 1577 at Blythburgh, Black Shook is said to have burst in through the church doors. He ran up the aisle past a large congregation, attacking a man and a boy and causing the church steeple to collapse through the roof. As the dog left, the beast left scorch marks on the north door, which can be seen at the church to this day. The Black Shook has a mixed reputation. In the earlier days of the legend, the Shook was known as a negative omen. In its first encounters, it was even said to have eliminated people directly. Today, the Shook's reputation has received an unlikely makeover. her. Some modern witnesses, mostly women, have reported that the shark acted as a protector and guided them home when they were lost at night. Sometimes referred to as an omen of death, sometimes a more companionable animal, but you might not want to take those chances if you are faced in front of the terrifying beast.
Number 3 on this list is the Clayton House. This has got to be one of the most haunted spots in Arkansas, and it's developed quite the legend around it. Arkansas.com says, originally serving as the residence for William Henry Harrison Clayton and his family, the Clayton House has also been home to several paranormal experiences. Director Martha Seiler and her employees steer clear of a bedroom on the second floor where the sounds of boots stomping and doors slamming have been heard. In Clayton's study, Seiler and her daughter have both seen an apparition of a woman with gray hair dressed in brown. A carpenter took some pictures while working on the house, and when he got them back, a woman appeared. Paranormal investigators have captured several recordings in the house, including one of a cat meowing and a man yelling an obscenity. When the public was invited on these investigations, a woman reported her hair being tugged and a man saw a person's face. Wow, so there is a lot going on here and a lot to break down. First off, we have the sounds that are coming from the second floor. Boots stamping on the ground and doors slamming. Is this potentially the ghost of William Henry Harrison Clayton expressing his disapproval of something? If so, what is he trying to tell us and why does he seem so mad? Second off, we have the woman who's appearing in the Clayton study. Who is she? Is she the wife of William? And what would have happened to her that has caused her ghost to stay here? I imagine it must have been something pretty tragic. Then we have a carpenter taking pictures and a woman show up in them who wasn't there. Is this the same woman who was in the study, or is this a different woman entirely? And finally, we have some paranormal investigators capturing literal recordings of the ghosts and ghouls who reside here. Also, they captured a cat too. Don't know if that was just a cat or a ghost cat or like what the cat has to do with it, but now we have to factor that into this mess of a place as well. One big circus of ghosts is what this house is, and the thing that has stumped everyone is why. From my research, I couldn't find any horrific tragedies that went down here. It's just an old house. I guess sometimes it really do just be like that, and this place was just meant to be haunted. Number 2 on this list is the Allen House. What is it with Arkansas and these creepy houses, man? And they all have creepy names too. Like the Allen House. Who the heck would want to stay at the Allen House? Anyways, Arkansas.com says, built in 1906, the Allen House is located along North Main Street and features Gothic-style architecture and wrought iron fencing. The house was planned by local businessman Joe Lee Allen to be the most impressive house the town had ever seen. Unfortunately, in December 1948, the family experienced a grave tragedy. Their daughter, Liddell, consumed mercury cyanide-laced punch in the house's master suite. Out of grief, her mother sealed off the room, and it would not be entered by anyone for nearly 4 decades. During its time as an apartment building in the 1950s, tenants would report eerie occurrences, including hazy figures appearing in photographs, furniture being unexplainably rearranged, and several reports of a lady sitting in a turret window. So, at least with this house, we have a reason as to why it's haunted. In the last one, we didn't even know. There wasn't anything clear. I think this one is pretty clear and obvious, though. Liddell took her own life in the master suite, and the mother completely sealed off that room, effectively trapping any spirit or paranormal energy in there. Such a tragic story that you never want to hear. Now, we can't forget that story either, because the paranormal events, and I'm assuming Liddell's spirit, keeps haunting this place. Avoid the Allen House altogether if you're ever in Arkansas. And finally, number 1 on this list is Ghost Mountain. This is definitely the sickest and most twisted story on this list for sure. Arkansas.com says, a tragic story surrounds a mountain southeast of Drake Field Airport in Fayetteville. In the 1930s, a man came home to his wife and child after a long night of drinking. His wife had been up all night caring for the sick child whose incessant crying had made the inebriated father furious. In his anger, he grabbed the baby, stumbled outside, and threw the child down their well. His wife grabbed the well's rope in an attempt to save the baby, but the father cut the rope, leaving the wife and child in the well. The father left town, never to be seen again. Reports have been made that a woman's screams and a baby's crying can still be heard in this location. If this story is true, then my God, this father rivals the most sick and twisted individuals to ever walk this earth. I don't care how drunk you are, to take your kid and to throw your own child, your own flesh and blood into a well, and then have your wife follow that child, and to leave them there. This is the scum of the earth, guys. It's no wonder this place is haunted based on an event like this. My heart just goes out to that child and that wife, and hopefully one day their souls can find peace. Number 5 in this list is the Arkansas Highway 365. There is quite the tale that surrounds this highway in Arkansas, one that makes driving on it quite scary. Arkansas.com says, years ago a young man was driving down Arkansas 365 south of Little Rock when he saw a young girl on the roadside. He offered to give her a lift and draped his coat over her shoulders because she was cold and soaked from the rain. She gave him directions to her house. When the young man got out of the car and walked around to the other side to help her out of her seat, no one was there. Confused, the man walked up to the house and knocked on the door. A woman answered and she explained what had occurred. She said, "That young girl is my daughter who was killed years ago. She hitchhikes back home once a year." The young man then drove to the cemetery to see the young girl's grave. There he found his coat draped over her tombstone. This is just one of the stories of this young girl, but this happens, as the woman suggested, once a year. Once a year, a good Samaritan who is simply trying to help the young girl will be fooled into driving a ghost around for a few hours. I have no idea how that dude, after getting to the cemetery, was able to get in his car and keep driving after that. Like, the second I saw my coat dangling from the tombstone like that, I would immediately tapped out. I couldn't figure out what time of year this happens at, which is too bad, because then I could have warned you guys, but be aware that it will happen without fail at least once. So if you do see a young girl on the side of the road along this highway, definitely stop to help, but just know you might be picking up a ghost. Number 4 on this list is Mary Walters. The legend of Mary Walters goes hand in hand with the legend and haunting that surrounds Curran Hall. Arkansas.com says, currently the home of the Little Rock Visitors Information Center, the house was originally built by Colonel Ebenezer Walters for his young bride Mary. Mary Walters was never able to see the completed structure as she died in childbirth just before the house was finished. Grief-stricken, Colonel Walters left the state and the house was owned by several different people, some of whom have reported experiencing the presence of Mary Walters. Visitor center staff have also experienced eerie occurrences, including a picture coming off the wall and a coffee machine making coffee with no grounds or water present. Mary Walters apparently haunts this ground now and the areas surrounding it. Nobody really knows what it is that she wants, just that she's here all the time, haunting everyone and everything. I guess she must really be fascinated by the coffee maker though, because that's often a device that she haunts and messes with. Maybe just technology in general is something that gets to her. Considering she never got to see this building get finished, to see it now, totally finished, and also with literal futuristic stuff in it would be kinda crazy. Well, I guess normal stuff for us, but futuristic stuff for her. Either way, she isn't said to be a dangerous ghost, just an annoying one. Be wary if you ever end up at Curran Hall, Mary Walters might be watching. Number 3 on this list is the sacrificial lakes. Most of the time when somebody enters a body of water, they're worried about becoming food to the fish that live in the said. Most of the time when someone enters a body of water, they're worried about becoming food to the fish that live in said body of water. What they usually aren't as concerned with is becoming food to the actual water itself. That's exactly what some people in Romania believe in regards to some of their bigger lakes though. Lake Vinderel, for instance, is known to some locals as a lake which will actually swallow people up. Even the most skilled swimmers who go here will drown and never be heard from again. Most of the time these bodies are never found, but there's a legend that says a piece of bloody flesh floats on top of the water at all times. Lake Vinderel is one of the most famous, but it isn't the only lake in Romania that has some dark lore around it. One lake literally swallowed up an entire town when a slope collapsed and forced the homes along with a church inside the water. People around that area often hear the ringing of church bells as they pass by the lake, thinking that the spirits of those who died in this tragedy still haunt the area. Because of all this death in these Romanian lakes, it's now believed that sacrifices must be made to keep the water at bay. Yep, that's right guys, what better way to stop people from dying in the lakes than to have people specifically specifically die from the lakes. That's the train of thought, and it's most prevalent in the Maramureș region of Romania amongst the elderly folk who live there. They think that the only way to calm the dark spirits who clearly inhabit these waters is to occasionally offer a human sacrifice. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't able to find exact details on who has been sacrificed or when, but I imagine that this has taken place at least once in Romania's history if there's an entire legend around it. I also find it kind of interesting that the Romanians don't have a particular demon or creature in mind who could be behind this. As of right now, it's just thought that there's a dangerous entity in the lake water and that sacrificing a human should relax that entity, at least for a little while. Either way, if you're going to go swimming in Romania, then stay away from the lakes. Number 2 on this list is the World War II ghosts. There's a town called Okna Muirs, and in that town there's a very specific mansion with some very interesting lore surrounding it. That mansion is called the Teleki Mansion. This mansion is really interesting because it didn't actually see much fighting at all, but is currently haunted with ghosts from World War II. The ghosts of these World War II soldiers who haunt this place sadly caused their tragic fate themselves. One evening, the soldiers went into the mansion and decided to enjoy a little bit too much wine. The mansion had cellars full of nice quality bottles, and the soldiers definitely overindulged. In fact, they got so hammered that they decided to start firing off their guns in the basement before passing out. They passed out in the cellar, and it's said that from the guns that they shot off, the wine started filling up the room. They were far too gone to notice and actually drowned in said wine. Now these soldiers haunt the mansion and locals see them regularly. In fact, some blurry photos were taken back in 2011 of these ghosts in the place. Dying is obviously worst case scenario and never what anyone wants, but I guess the one thing that you can say for these guys is that they probably died at least happy. Number 1 on this list is the Nymphs of Sioclavina Cave. Deep in the mountains of Transylvania, through a long road of rivers and beautiful scenery, sits a forgotten cave called the Sioclavina Cave. This cave is full of crazy stuff from the past and has been a really important find for archaeologists studying Romanian history. Tombs, treasures, skeletal remains, and most important, potential evidence of nymphs are all found in this mysterious cavern. In case you aren't familiar with what a nymph is, then Britannica tells us that they were usually associated with fertile, growing things such as trees or with water. They were not immortal but were extremely long-lived and were on the whole kindly disposed toward men. These were women in Greek mythology who were considered divinities. It's believed that this cave may have once been the home to some of them. The treasure that's been found here, some of the inscriptions that are on the wall, the overall environment outside the cave, all of it fits the bill when it comes to a nymph. At the very least, if a nymph or a group of nymphs hadn't have lived here, then people definitely think this would have been a site of worship for them. Animal carcasses were found here as well, and it's believed that they would have been used for some sacrificial rituals to such higher beings. Now this cave is researched extensively, and locals think that it might possess some mysterious powers. Also, that the rivers that run around this area are rich with minerals and other healing properties. I suppose this urban legend isn't super scary, but honestly kinda cool. Then again, nymphs have been known to be dangerous in the past, so if there was one lurking around this cave still, you wouldn't want to get on its bad side. Number 5 on this list is the Falling Boy. This is a sad legend that's probably true. The Black Church is located in the Romanian city of Brasov and is a beautiful old Gothic church. It almost never made it to 2022 though, because several hundred years ago it had a horrible fire. The church did manage to survive and had a bunch of renovations done on it to spruce it up. It's around this period of time that people think the Falling Boy statue was erected. On one single pillar of the exterior of the church, there's a statue of a boy who looks to be falling over. Either that or he's searching for something on the ground. It's difficult to say for sure. Either way, no one has any idea why this statue is here, and 3 legends have come out explaining it. Arena Webb writes, some say that he was the son of a priest and that he was naughty. As a punishment, his father sent him in the church's attic. But then the Great Fire started, and so the boy got trapped in there. The statue was built depicting him trying to escape the flames. Another legend, and a more popular one, is that the boy was helping with the construction of the church. At one point, his boss told him to check if the wall is straight. He leaned over the walls and he fell. His boss felt guilty and ordered a statue. Others, though, say it was They say that this boy was so good working at the construction of the church that a fellow worker got envious. He sent the boy to check the walls and he pushed him. The boy died, but the man couldn't live with the guilt, so he confessed shortly after. The other builders decided to make the statue in the boy's memory. So those are the 3 legends about the boy, and sadly all of them result in the boy's death. Now it's thought that his spirit still lingers here at this church, and if you're lucky, you may even be able to spot him. Comment down below what you guys think about this legend and which of the 3 stories you believe the most. Curious to know what you guys got. Number 4 on this list is the Pied Piper. You've most likely heard the name and probably the story of the Pied Piper before. If you haven't, then let me read off a great passage from Andre Diamond describing the tale. The Pied Piper legend originated in Hamelin, Germany during the Middle Ages. As the story goes, the town was struggling with a rat infestation problem and was desperate for relief. A mysterious man in pied clothing approached the mayor and promised he could rid the city of its problem in return for payment of 1,000 guilders. The mayor agreed, and the man played a magical pipe to lure all the city's rats to a nearby body of water where they drowned. When the piper returned for his reward, the mayor refused. As if visualizing a rat infestation was not traumatizing enough, the story then takes another sinister turn. Furious that he had been cheated, the piper soon returned to the town of Hamelin on St. John's and Paul's Day. As the grown members of the town attend church, the piper once again played his magical pipe through the streets, this time luring the town's 130 children from their homes. Depending on the version of the story, he either led them to the lake or into a cave, and none were ever seen again. Most versions agree there were a few children left behind. One was crippled and he could not keep up, one was deaf so he could not hear the music, and one was blind and could not see where the other children were going. When church let out, the survivors told the townspeople what had happened, and the rest is history. Now you're probably thinking, okay Nick, well what the hell does this have to do with Romania? Well, there's another version of this legend that says this man took the into Vaghis Cave and then after a time slowly let them out. Vaghis Cave is in Transylvania, and it's believed by the locals that this Pied Piper still lives there. They also think that this is the true version of the legend because there's a very large population of German-speaking Saxons in that area. These people are thought to be the descendants of the children who were taken so many years ago. Even to this day though, everyone still fears Vaghis Cave and still fears the Piper.
Coming in at number 3, we've got a deep woods discovery. There's nothing quite like having your expectations subverted, yeah? I don't want to spoil too much of this story before I tell it, so here we go. I found this one in green text format, and it seems to be coming from a person living in a rural area. Every year, they find that hiking in the wooded area near their home is quite pleasant in the fall, so they head out to do just that. However, they seem to find some of the more overgrown areas unsettling. Makes sense, especially if you're far away from society at large. As they explore a little more, they notice something dive into the bushes, giving them a start. At that point, the hiker has had enough and decides to book it. There's something nearby though, and it seems to be following quite closely. Eventually, the hiker makes it to the end of the trail and realizes that they have to go back where they came from. After the experience they had, they're not looking forward to it. In the end, they do indeed buck up and head back to the top of the trail. When they get to the part where they saw something dive into the bushes, they realize that it wasn't a monster or anything sinister, but in fact a little girl. She calls out for help, but as the hiker gets closer, a strange feeling washes over him. It looks like the girl is hurt and can't walk on her own, but when the hiker gets close enough for the little girl to see him, she begins screaming bloody murder. Oh no. It's at this point that the hiker gives up all pretenses and eats the girl, taking her form. Bet you didn't see that one coming. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Moose Man. Let's take a quick trip to Alberta, except instead of seeing the mountains or hockey, we'll go looking for shape-shifting terrors. Hooray! There were tales circulating around for a while about some sort of centaur with moose features instead of horse ones, although many claim these to be patently false. That's not going to stop me from talking about it as if it were real though. This thing lived by the river and never got too close to human settlements. However, it would often kill and mutilate game animals to make them unusable. In fact, it's also said to have been involved in the killing and maiming of many men as well. Beyond the moose-centaur comparison, there isn't much to be said about the way this creature looks. It's huge, as all moose tend to be, and walks around with flesh hanging from its antlers. Like many creatures in the same vein, it reeks of something otherworldly and tends to make hideous noises when encountered. Whether the moose look is its only avatar or one of many forms, we may never know. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Roadrunner. Meep meep indeed. While walking his dog at around 10 p.m., our storyteller came across a couple dead rabbits accompanied by a horrid stench. Assuming it was just a fox or something, he moved right along. Soon after, his dog started acting super weird though. It wouldn't move at all and seemed to be staring at something off in the distance, eyes wide. Then the smell came back. This time he couldn't quite place where it was coming from, but he'd heard enough stories about bad smells and evil vibes in the woods to know to be careful. He took his dog and got off the path, hiding in some tall grass to the side. That's when he saw it. Something almost indescribable. Gray skin, rotten flesh, a horrible, emaciated horse's head, limbs that only seemed to half work. It made him want to run away at full speed immediately, but that was a bad call with it so close by. Sneaking seemed to be the better choice. The man and his dog started creeping away and got about 50 feet. The creature was out of sight now and the man thought he could start running. But apparently the roadrunner knew exactly where he was trying to sneak away to and was immediately on his tail. Thankfully, the sneaking gave this man and his dog a bit of a head start and they were off to the races. As they ran from this awful beast, the man could hear it breathing. It sounded like an overexcited child, happy to be running in the woods in search of something good. Thankfully, getting back to the jagged gravel path proved to be a challenge for the roadrunner. Whatever was wrong with its limbs made it difficult to traverse the rocky terrain, and eventually it gave up, screaming all the while. The man hasn't seen the creature again, but that's no guarantee that it's not around. Shapeshifting isn't uncommon with these kinds of things. Coming in at number 5, we've got a Nevadan escapade. This story comes from a self-proclaimed survivalist living in Nevada. They open up the tale with a bit of a disclaimer, saying that they never really believed in the paranormal before this happened. In fact, prior to experiencing this, they would have assumed that anything strange going on would likely be the result of government experiments and the like. There was absolutely no way they expected an experience like the one I'm about to summarize. So the survivalist had a couple weeks of vacation saved up and didn't want to let it roll over to the next year. Taking that time off, he didn't really know what to do with himself. After a day of doing nothing, he decided to go camping on his own as none of his friends were able to take any time off. Away he went, packing some basic supplies and grabbing coffee and donuts on the way out. After setting up camp in the middle of nowhere, the survivalist decided to have a little vodka and do some target shooting. Following an encounter with a jackrabbit, he came across a freshly killed coyote. Seeing as hunting coyotes is relatively common practice in Nevada, he didn't think much of it, but he still saw the way the body was left as strange. Weird smell too. That evening, while scanning through some capped channels on his ham radio, the survivalist came across something odd. Knowing that there was military presence in the area, he wasn't too surprised to hear the sounds of gunfire coming through the speaker. However, these wargame sounds were followed up by what he described as nails on a chalkboard and a blood-curdling scream. Immediately after hearing these noises, the radio crapped out. Uh-oh. Reassuring himself that whatever happened there was hundreds of miles away, he went to bed. The next day, while puttering about, he wandered into a fenced-off military area, letting him know that whatever those noises were last night, they were probably closer than he assumed. Exploring this area more, he came across a cave that piqued his interest. Heading inside, he didn't notice anything odd at first, but soon became attuned to a very particular rotting smell. The same smell he noticed when coming across the oddly killed coyote. This tipped something off in his head and he got the hell out of there. At that point, the survivalist was terrified. Returning to his camp, he found that it had been raided. Everything was torn up, tossed about, and emptied, and nothing was missing though. While checking on his equipment, he noticed that all of these sounds in the area had stopped, dead quiet as night fell. And that's when he saw it. A humanoid creature standing off to the side, looking straight at him with dark voids for eyes. Hell, it even looked like it cracked a little smile. The survivalist tried to shoot it, but his bullets didn't seem to do anything but piss it off, making it scream in an ungodly fashion. Seeing that his weapon wasn't doing much, he booked it out of there and found a crevice to hide out in until sunrise. And when the sun rose, he got the hell out of there, ASAP. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Forest Ranger. Being a forest ranger must be fascinating, right? Out in the wilderness all day, every day, minimal human contact, keeping an eye on the local flora and fauna, occasionally taking part in rescues, maybe helping a lost hiker find their way, wearing a cool hat. What a life. Of course, it isn't all fun and games. There are plenty of harrowing situations one can find themselves in when deep in the forest. However, mythical monsters don't usually come up during job training, so you better watch out. Take this tale from a forest ranger somewhere in the States. While responding to a missing persons report, they found themselves in a tricky area of the hiking trail. At some point it splits, with one of the paths leading people deeper into the forest instead of back to the service area. Naturally, the ranger called for some backup, and about a half hour later his backup showed up. Ranger and backup head off into the woods, calling out for the missing person, but to no avail. And when they got to the split in the path, Mr. Backup disappeared too. Trying for a while to contact the missing backup on their walkie, the ranger got a little spooked. then, when all hope seemed to be lost, he ran into someone matching the description of the original missing person. However, this individual didn't respond to anything the ranger said to them. The ranger took the person back to their truck and told them to wait in the back while he went to look for his backup again. At this point, his backup chimed in on the walkie, saying that he'd found the missing hiker at the bottom of a hill with a broken leg and would be returning with him soon, which didn't line up with what he had seen. The ranger went back to the truck and saw that it was empty, with the passenger door wide open and the cage inside bent out of shape. Apparently that kind of stuff had been happening for a while too. Folks hearing their neighbors calling out in the night when they knew their neighbors were on vacation, or perhaps hearing their dog barking outside when the dog was at the foot of their bed.
Coming in at number 3, who is Andy's monster? As we know, Pixar movies all exist in the same universe. They are all connected, so saying that Inside Out is connected to Toy Story 3, which is connected to Monsters Inc. Since this reveal, many have been making assumptions as to who the monsters are of other children in the universe, particularly Andy from Toy Story. Because as we know, Monsters Inc., every monster has a child, and they come into their room at night and scare them. Boo. So this theory was sparked after the release of Monsters Inc. after Jessie from Toy Story appeared in Boo's room. However, we don't know if every child in the human world has a monster, so one person decided there was only one way to figure it out, and that was by finding Andy's door in the monster world. We know that this is what Andy's door looks like. It is a white door with 5 rectangular panels. Now that is tough to spot in Monsters Inc. simply because of how many doors there are. Just take a look. Here we encounter a hiccup though. We know that Monsters Inc. is set in the future with the doors serving as a time portal. Monsters Inc. was released in 2001, so we can assume that perhaps they travelled to Andy's door way earlier. So let's head to Monsters University. And we have found it. This is Andy's door. Let's return to the picture of Andy's door though, the one with the cardboard box and the wallpaper with blue and clouds on it. Now take a look at this picture. Right when the monsters are all warming up before scaring in Monsters Inc., one of the backgrounds Randall is camouflaging is Andy's wallpaper. There we go. Toy Story Monsters Inc. connected, and that is the monster of Andy's. Coming in at number 2, Carl is Dead. Up is a great movie, a tearjerker, a movie we still think about with sadness, but a great movie nonetheless. Released back in 2009, the film centers on an elderly widower named Carl Fredrickson and an earnest boy named Russell. By tying thousands of balloons to his house, Carl sets out to fulfill his dreams to see the wilds of South America and complete a promise made to his late wife Ellie. We're all familiar with the story, however there is a truly bleak theory out there that is going to crush all of your hopes and dreams. This theory states that Carl is dead, and was dead the entire time. It is said that he died at the beginning of the movie, and everything following that is his journey to heaven. According to some theorists, he passed away in his sleep the night after the courts tell him he needs to leave his home and move to a retirement home. Following on from that, it is also said that the young boy Russell is Carl's guardian angel, and that he needs one last badge in order to become a senior wilderness explorer, or in this interpretation, the last act that would earn him his wings. I quote, "I could help you cross the street, I could help you cross your yard, I could help you cross your porch. Well, I gotta help you cross something. Turns out he may be helping him cross over to the other side." The theory goes on to state, I quote, "Russell's final badge requires him to help a senior citizen. This makes sense. Russell's other badges were preparing him in various ways for the final test, which is to help a senior citizen into the afterlife. Russell's innocence and devotion shows his purity, and the example he sets through that purity helps Carl see the error in his ways of thinking." It also goes on to state that the raising of the house represents Carl's initial transition from the physical world to the spiritual world. Honestly, this theory makes me very sad. And finally, coming in at number 1, Pixar's Cars. Cars is a 2006 comedy produced by Pixar Animation Studios. The movie is set in a world populated entirely by anthropomorphic talking cars and other vehicles. So it may come as a surprise to you that there are a ton of legends and theories about this kids movie. Now, as I said before, the dominant form of life in the world of cars are sentient automobiles with seemingly no humans in sight. The cars though appear to have grown to human level intelligence, with the ability to produce technology and an organized civilization. Now, while the movie just presents us with the idea that this is simply a world of sentient cars, folks have other theories, and that perhaps this isn't a separate universe but is actually our own tens of thousands of years in the future. And on top of that, perhaps humans aren't gone but instead are very, very different. The main hint here is that the cars still retain small, very human details such as windows, doors, and door handles. If there were no humans, why would the cars need any of these things? Unless of course there were beings who would need to open the cars to get inside, beings like us. The theory here is that humans have become the cars, which is also dubbed the homunculus theory, which states that there are actually people inside the cars, and they are the source of the car's personality, intelligence, and everything else. The car itself is just an external body of these human-derived creatures. Some folks believe this human-car hybrid stemmed from a biological calamity or plague that may have potentially occurred in the universe and as a result killed off the vast majority of people and animal life. Perhaps what killed off most of the humans is still a danger to the rest of civilization, with everyone turning to their cars, creating a symbiotic relationship between man and machine. Eventually, specially designed cars were built and human babies were produced in amniotic vats, becoming embedded within an automotive exoskeleton. Coming in at number 5, Nemo was dead. Released in 2003, Finding Nemo tells the story of an overprotective clownfish named Marlin, who, along with a regal blue tang named Dory, searches for his missing son, Nemo. Along the way, Marlin learns to take risks and comes to terms with Nemo taking care of himself. It is a triumphant father-son tale. However, this is ruined when you find out that Nemo may have been dead the entire time and that Marlin was hallucinating everything that happened. This theory states that Nemo died in the shark attack that killed his mother and his siblings at the beginning of the movie. The rest of the story that follows is Marlin trying to cope with the loss and tragedy. Moreover, Marlin's entire journey throughout the movie is a spot-on allegory for the 5 stages of grief, and his or the examples for why that's the case. He doesn't want Nemo to go to school because he isn't ready. That is denial. Marlin yells at Nemo for swimming too far out. Anger. Marlin joins Dory, turtles, etc. to find Nemo. Bargaining. Marlin watches Nemo get flushed down the toilet. Depression. And at the end, Marlin learns to let go of the past and change his ways. Acceptance. Also, if you really want to cement this theory, in Latin, Nemo means nothing. It literally translates to nothing, meaning he doesn't even exist. So, childhood ruined. Sorry. Coming in at number 4, we have Andy's mum is a toy abandoner. Yeah, this one is crazy. A lot of us grew up with Toy Story, I certainly did. The movie was released in 1995 and takes place in a world where anthropomorphic toys come to life when humans are not present, with the plot focusing on the relationship between an old-fashioned pull-string cowboy doll named Woody and an astronaut action figure Buzz Lightyear. These are all toys that belong to a young boy named Andy. This theory goes, however, that Andy's mum is a toy abandoner. According to one theorist, Andy's mum was the original owner of Jessie. If you remember Jessie's flashback of how she ended up discarded and boxed with her owner Emily having given her away after growing too old to play with her. If you put 2 and 2 together, the logical conclusion is that Andy's mum is Emily. To add fuel to this theory, in the movie, Andy wears a human-sized version of Jessie's hat, 4 years prior to Jessie appearing in Toy Story 2, and to top it off, in the Jessie flashback scenes you can see that same hat hanging on the bed of young Emily. Case closed. Emily is Andy's mum, and Andy's mum is cruel and she needs to go to prison.
Number 3 on this list is the 1886 Crescent Hotel and Spa. Well, this sucks, guys. A nice spa and hotel ruined once again because of ghosts and a pesky urban legend. Arkansas urban legend says the legendary 1886 Crescent Hotel and Spa is one of the most popular haunted Arkansas destinations. Visitors can stay overnight and take tours revealing the secret underground passages, the property's old morgue, and hear the multitude of hauntings that have been reported throughout the years. The most well-known ghost of the Crescent is Michael, a stonecutter who helped build the hotel and who fell to his death at the location of room 218. Michael is said to have been a womanizer who often got in trouble for flirting with the ladies. Room 218 is now the Crescent's most requested room. Another paranormal guest of the hotel is Dr. John Fremont Ellis, former hotel physician. Dressed in top hat and fine clothing, he's been seen on the staircase from the 2nd floor to the lobby, and smoke from Ellis's tobacco pipe is sometimes smelled near the elevator. Look out for a disappearing pool of blood, a resident morgue ghost around the autopsy table, and more eerie sightings. Oh yeah guys, just casually look out for that disappearing pool of blood and dead ghosts that's out and about. No big deal. Oh, and also the ghost of a doctor who just walks around and does weird haunted crap. Totally cool, man. All very casual. Yeah, that's a big no, everybody. Spas are supposed to be relaxing. There is nothing relaxing about doctors and dead people and blood. I'll get my massages elsewhere, thank you very much. Number 2 on this list is the Toltec Mounds. Once again, we have another creepy name that could be a Red Dead Redemption 2 mission. Arkansas urban legend says, known to some as the Stonehenge of Arkansas, the mounds and earthen embankments present at Toltec Mounds Archaeological State Park are remnants of the Plume Bayou culture, not the Mexican Toltec or Aztec tribes as the name suggests. The Plume Bayou people built 18 mounds to serve as a ceremonial, religious, governmental, and social complex, with at least one serving as a burial mound. Archaeological digs at the site have uncovered items that cannot be traced to other Native American cultures, and also have suggested that the Plume Bayou people simply disappeared with no trace of where they went or why they left. Visitors to the present day park have claimed to see lights, orbs, and even ghostly apparitions of ancient people. At night, footsteps have been heard around the existing mound site. I have no idea what those orbs are or who they're coming from, but I don't want any part of it, folks. Clearly, there is a deep spiritual energy at this place that does not want to be messed with. By having all these warning signs, we should know that by now. I think that we should listen to it and stay away. And finally, number 1 on this list is the natural steps. The Earth is a big place, and seeing that it's such a big place, occasionally it makes some pretty cool geological things. Sometimes these weird occurrences, though, are a bit too strange for anyone's liking. Arkansas urban legend says, a unique geological formation along the banks of the Arkansas River, Natural Steps is a small town with an unsettling history of buildings, structures, and people disappearing. Days after a local couple's wedding atop the Natural Steps, the groom perished from a sudden and mysterious illness. Overwhelmed with grief, the widow disappeared after the funeral, many believe by committing suicide by jumping off the Natural Steps. Residents and visitors alike have since reported seeing a woman in white strolling within the town. During the Civil War, Confederate forces are believed to have sunk their own gunboat containing vast sums of gold in order to keep Union troops at bay. 3 Confederate soldiers died during the explosion, and their graves can be found in the town cemetery. Legend has it, on moonlit nights, the ghosts of the 3 soldiers march in a single file line to the Arkansas River to uncover their hidden treasure. So we have multiple things going on at these steps / town / urban legend hell spot. We have a groom who has apparently taken their own life. Then we have his wife, who apparently haunts the area now because she's really upset about her groom who took his own life. Then we have Confederate soldiers wandering about because of some gunboat that went under in a big explosion. And then when the moon is out, apparently these soldiers decide that they want to go treasure hunting and go walk about to find it. This is just one big symphony of creepy. The only time I'd recommend going to this spot is when the moon is fully out, just to see if you can find the treasure, but even that is a big risk. Number 5 on this list is the Empress of Little Rock. The Empress of Little Rock, that just sounds imposing, man. Like a mission in Red Dead Redemption 2 or something like that. Arkansas urban legend says, originally built as the most extravagant dwelling in the state by wealthy saloon keeper James H. Hornibrook, the house currently operates as the Empress of Little Rock, a luxury bed and breakfast. Several paranormal encounters had been witnessed by former owner Robert H. Blair, workers, and guests. Blair saw a period-dressed gentleman complete with top hat floating down the stairs. While restoring the secret poker room in the attic, hired painter Timmy Watts found himself locked out even though no handle or lock was on the door yet. When he returned with a screwdriver to let himself back in, Watts saw that the door was now open and the same image of a man that Blair previously witnessed appeared before him. That is one frightening story from Watts there. The door gets locked even though it literally physically cannot get locked, and then it gets unlocked and you see a man appear before you. Very questionable. Also, just the fact that you were also in the secret poker room in the attic as well. Like, you already know that some shady stuff probably went down up there after hours. I imagine that those walls have been host to some very questionable activities themselves. Either way, this place is super haunted. Lots of the locals don't ever stay here anymore for fear of what could be lurking here. They tell the newcomers about it, but oftentimes the newcomers don't heed their warnings and go there anyways. Usually, after they've done so, there's deep regret that's filled inside of them. Pretty much everybody that goes and stays here wishes that they hadn't. Number 4 on this list is the Mount Holly Cemetery. I feel like every state, every province, every country, every region, pretty much everywhere has got to have their own urban legend about a haunted cemetery. Like there's always one place where there've just been too many strange occurrences. Well, Arkansas is no different, and they have their own cemetery with legends surrounding it. Arkansas urban legend says, located at Broadway and 12th Streets in Little Rock, Mount Holly Cemetery is the final resting place for many notable people. Several reports of paranormal sightings and photographs taken at the property have been made, including apparitions of people dressed in period clothing and bright lights and mists. Some visitors have claimed that statues have been mysteriously relocated to the lawns of nearby houses. The sounds of a flute echo have also been heard, and trinkets and small items have been known to appear and disappear around the graves. I wonder what that flute echo is. Could it be some sort of spirit who just really likes the flute? What if it's something more sinister than that? The flute has often been tied to some pretty bad and devilish demons before. Is it possible that one of these creatures is afoot and using this flute to perform some sort of bad ritual? I would ask you guys to be the judge for yourselves, but that would mean that you'd probably need to go to this place, which I highly recommend not doing.
Number 3, no one is declared dead on Disney property. Disney can apparently claim that no one has ever died at one of their theme parks because they always ensure that accident victims are removed from the park property before being declared dead. This legend is based upon the very specific and often confusing distinction between actual death and declared death. For example, if a seriously injured victim of an automobile accident were loaded into an ambulance and died en route to the hospital, he or she generally would not be officially declared dead until they arrived at the hospital and were examined by a doctor. The difference in time between the actual physical death of the patient and the declaration of death by the doctor is the discrepancy on which this legend runs. So the claim here is not that no one has actually, ever died on Disney theme park property, but whether Disney can legitimately make the claim that no one has ever died at a Disney park because they ensure that any declaration of death takes place outside a park property. So does Disney really attempt to, get injured or already dead persons off their property before any declaration of death occurs? Obviously, they're not going to put out some PR statement and be like, oh yeah, totally. But some former Disney employees have reported that the no one dies on Disney property is indeed a company policy. That is suggested in the book Inside the Mouse. If guests have the nerve to die, they wait until they've crossed the line and can do so safely off the property. In all fairness, however, it should be noted that in some jurisdictions, once paramedics begin life-saving efforts, they cannot discontinue those efforts until the patient has been transported to a medical facility, even if the patient is obviously no longer with us. And the sprawling size and relative isolation of the Walt Disney World complex in Florida make it kind of, imperative that persons in need of urgent medical attention be loaded into helicopters and transported to hospitals ASAP. So the combination of those two factors makes it rather unlikely that anyone would actually be declared dead on Walt Disney World property, regardless of how the Walt Disney Company, wants to be perceived. Disney is well known for their image consciousness. They've been criticized in the past for policies such as not allowing marked emergency vehicles into their parks so as not to upset park guests, and so many people perceive them as being willing and overzealous enough to stretch a pretty semantic point for a minor public relations advantage. So while I think I can call this urban legend true, it's more of a technicality than anything nefarious. Or maybe I just fell for the propaganda. Number 2, ashes galore. Trust me, I was tempted to move into the Haunted Mansion when I visited. I wrote it as many times as I could, but I don't have any plans to actually make it my resting place after I leave this world, even though I would blend in. For years and years, the Haunted Mansion has been home to an endless supply of Disney myths and legends, including sightings of more than one real ghost and a dispute as to whether Walt Disney himself is one of the singing busts. But the attraction's most prevalent and persistent rumor is that guests regularly spread the remains of their friends and family inside the ride. And unlike some of the stuff I'll mention today that could be up for debate, this is 100% true. The Wall Street Journal of all publications did an expose on the practice and found that spreading ashes at both Disneyland and Walt Disney World is a common occurrence that isn't just limited to the Haunted Mansion. Human ashes have been spread in flower beds, on bushes, and on Magic Kingdom lawns, outside the park gates and during fireworks displays, on Pirates of the Caribbean, and in the moat underneath the flying elephants of the Dumbo ride. Most frequently of all, though, according to custodians and park workers, they've been dispersed throughout the Haunted Mansion. The 49-year-old attraction featuring an eerie old estate full of imaginary ghosts. According to a former Disneyland custodian, the Haunted Mansion probably has so much human ash remains in it that it's not even funny. In fact, there's a special code and process for cleaning up the remains of unexpected guests who slip into the park. HEPA cleanup means that an ultrafine or HEPA vacuum cleaner is needed to suck up and remove any remains that a cast member has observed being dumped on the ride. A Disney spokeswoman said that this type of behavior is strictly prohibited and unlawful, and guests who attempt to do so will be escorted off property. And while it's, very thoughtful in theory, please don't create a biohazard issue for cleanup crews. They already have too much to deal with on a regular basis. If you're looking for more of a what-if urban legend about the Haunted Mansion, one that's up for speculation claims that during the first preview of the attraction, the house was so scary one guest had a heart attack and passed after the first ride-through, resulting in the original haunt being closed. I'm a little more skeptical in that story because personally I found the ride more comforting than scary. But that's just me. Number 1, made to look. I think it's safe to assume we've all already heard about the alleged phallic artwork on the VHS cover of The Little Mermaid and the SFX mistaken for SEX in the Skyge and the Lion King, yes? I'm pretty sure they've been discussed ad nauseum over the internet at this point. One hidden naughty cameo I had never heard about until today can be found only in the original VHS release of The Rescuers, which is one of the few Disney VHS tapes I didn't own when I was little. Spoiler alert, by the way, if you haven't watched the movie before. So as the character of Orville dives to complete his rooftop takeoff, the rescuers pass a topless woman in a window. Since this wasn't in the original run, and only added to the film in post-production, the nude image wasn't discovered until home videos were paused or played in slow motion, which wasn't done as easily on VHS as it is now with the beauty of streaming and digital. Those early home video releases were recalled, and later versions of The Rescuers have been edited to omit the naughty image. You can tell that this was after Walt's passing, since he was known to have a crazy good eye for spotting mistakes in film. One specific story that's known to circulate alleges that a director had seen Walt spot mistakes that no one else could see. He even contended that Walt could catch a mistake on a single frame of film as it was run full speed in the projection room. And since a single frame of film is about 1 inch wide and runs at the rate of 24 frames per second, that means that a single frame is only on the screen for about 1/24th of a second. Most folks found it hard to believe that anyone, including Walt Disney, could spot a mistake that was visible for only that, short period of time. They finally decided that the best way to find out whether Walt could perform this incredible feat was to test him. So they had a film editor cut out one tiny frame in a strip of film, and in its place cut in another frame picture of a woman stark nude. When the time of the screening arrived, the group sat nervously, watching Walt as he stared at the screen as the film was shown, not saying a word. And all of a sudden, Walt yelled, "Hold it!" and the film projector stopped. Walt raised his hand, backed the film up a few feet, and then hold it, and sure enough, right there on screen was a single frame of the nude lady. Walt asked what the HE double hockey sticks, a picture of a naked woman, was doing in the middle of a Mickey Mouse cartoon, and the group told Walt the truth, that they wanted to see if he could really spot a mistake on a single frame of running film. Walt looked pleased. He had succeeded in catching the mistake and was proud of his keen eye. Suddenly my love of collecting and watching videos released on VHS so I can enjoy them in their original format sounds a little less eccentric and a lot more justified. I'm not the biggest fan of digital restoration. It always looks a little off to me. Also, I tend to get cranky if a voice performance gets redubbed. Number 5, Walt's frozen head. Alrighty, we're kicking off the day with the elephant in the room, the most popular urban legend that's been used as a pop culture joke for as long as I can remember. According to this long-standing Disney World urban legend, after Walt died of lung cancer at the age of 65 on December 15th of 1966, he was cryogenically preserved and stashed in a secret chamber somewhere at Walt Disney World Resort with hopes of revival in the future, possibly underneath the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. Also, it could have been over at Disneyland. Who knows? Walt's health had been deteriorating for many months before he finally agreed to enter St. Joseph Hospital in California on November the 2nd of 1966, where doctors discovered a walnut-sized spot on the x-ray of his left lung and advised immediate surgery. Disney left the hospital to attend the studio business for a couple of days, then re-entered St. Joseph on Sunday, November 6th, for surgery the next day. During Monday morning's operation, doctors found his left lung to be cancerous and removed it. His oversized lymph nodes were an indication that Walt didn't have much longer to go, and after 2 weeks of post-operative care, he was released from the hospital. He crossed the street to his studios and spent another 10 days tending to studio business and visiting relatives before he grew too weak and had to return to St. Joseph's on November 30th. His health started to fail even more rapidly than expected, and drugs and cobalt treatments sapped what little strength he had left. Walt died 2 weeks later when his circulatory system collapsed on the morning of, December 15th. In the decade since Walt's death, the claim that he arranged for his body to be frozen have become, kind of ubiquitous. Was Walt aware of the possibilities of life extension through cryogenics? He certainly could have been, aware of the progress being made in the research. Numerous articles and books on hypothermia and the preservation of animal tissue through freezing appeared in both the scientific, medical, and general press in the late 50s and early 60s. Anyone with an interest in the subject could easily have located this reading material. And even someone without a particular interest in the subject may have run across one or more articles on the topic in the general press. Whatever the possibilities, however, there was no documentary evidence to suggest that Walt was interested in or had even heard of, cryonics. Documentation of Disney's alleged fascination with preserving or extending his life through cryonics didn't appear until decades after his death, and what little information is available has predominantly been provided by some really questionable sources. Despite the persistent rumors, available documentation indicates that Walt was in fact cremated, and he publicly stated 10 years before his death that he didn't want a funeral, but he did want to be cremated, so that checks. His death certificate shows that he was cremated 2 days after he passed. The name, license number, and signature of the embalmer appearing on the certificate are those of a real embalmer who was employed at the Forest Lawn Mortuary at the time. A marked burial plot for Walt Disney and other family members can be found at the Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, and court papers indicate that the estate paid $40,000 for the interment property. Statements concerning Disney's alleged preoccupation with death are generally attempts to sensationalize the topic by distorting the facts. Although he did worry about dying prematurely, Walt wasn't obsessed with death. Supposedly having been told by a fortune teller that he would die when he was 35, he, kind of brooded about his inevitable demise during occasional bouts of depression, even though he had long passed that, but who hasn't? Contemplating one's mortality isn't an unusual behavior, and there's no evidence that Walt did so to an extensive degree. It is true that his death was not officially announced to the press until several hours after it occurred, on Tuesday, December 15th, but the reasons behind the delay were perfectly ordinary ones, and not so he could be rushed to a chamber. Several family members had to be notified before a public announcement could be made, and Disney studio executives had to be located and informed, that the head of their organization had passed before the information would be released to the press. Part of me will always believe this legend, though. Number 4, the authenticity of Pirates of the Caribbean. Even just uttering those words, I can smell the ride in my memory. I didn't understand the significance of smell, specifically at Walt Disney World, until I took a trip there earlier this year, and that's one of the smells that burned its way into my brain forever. But this isn't about smells, more the ghosty in the bones that might be a little too real. A welder named George was reportedly killed during the construction of Pirates of the Caribbean, which opened in Adventureland in 1973 at Walt Disney World in Florida. Today, George's ghost continues to haunt the immensely popular dark ride attraction at Disney's Magic Kingdom. Not only does George roam aimlessly around the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction, but he will shut the entire ride down if he is not greeted properly by Disney cast members. Although there's no official record of George's living existence, cast members are pretty superstitious when it comes to George. Guests have reported tales of encountering his spirit, with one claiming that while they were on the ride, they saw something out of the corner of their eye in the fire scene. But when they turned to look, nothing was there. And as they were leaving the scene, a cold brush of air went down their back. And when they turned around that time, they saw a floating ball of pure energy. Alrighty, moving on to the bones for the Disneyland version of the attraction. I'm pretty positive the Florida version only houses prop replicas, which is good because that would be way too much for my brain with George already lurking. But the California version of the ride did, in fact, originally feature genuine, real-life skeletal bones. The bones were provided by UCLA Medical Center and placed around various locations throughout the attraction. The morbid incorporation of actual human remains from the Walt Disney Company's perpetual strides towards perfection and authenticity, something I very much love about them. The technology of the day just wasn't up to par in producing realistic enough faux skeletons at the time. Fortunately, that's no longer the case, and apparently, Disney has since replaced the real bones with very realistic fake ones. But there is reportedly at least one skull that is still the real deal. You'll find it in the captain's quarters on the headboard behind the dead man's skeleton in the bed with the magnifying glass and map. Some sources say there are other real bones still present in the addition, so feel free to keep a close eye next time you visit the park. I know I will if I ever visit. Here's a common enough fear: finding a body under the bed. So like vacation couples, newlyweds, Disneyland guests, all have been the subject of an urban legend involving hotel occupants who blissfully fall asleep only to wake up to an awful stench coming from either under the bed or inside the mattress. Closer inspection reveals that a dead body has been stashed away, presumably not anybody who's died of natural causes. Now this traveling tale has been confirmed multiple times over. At least a dozen newspaper stories have detailed hotel rooms that have doubled as body disposal sites. While the smell is usually apparent right away, at least one couple slept on a mattress containing a body in Atlantic City back in 1999. Cases in Colorado, Florida, and Virginia have also been reported. In 2010, guests at a budget lodge in Memphis were horrified to discover that they had been sleeping above the body of Sonny Millbrook, who was reported missing at the time. Fabric softener had been stuffed in the ceiling tiles to try and mask the smell, and at least 3 other occupants had also rented the rooms since the disappearance, which, yikes. A court eventually convicted Millbrook's boyfriend, like Keith Moody, of the crime. More recently, and by that I mean just last year, a tourist named Mr. Zong checked into a hotel in Tibet when he was made aware of a smell that was so bad that he was like, "Can I change rooms?" And 2 days later, after he had been granted the room transfer, he learned the source of the smell because he was summoned back to the original room by a group of police officers. He was like, yo, what's going on? And they were like, oh, so somebody's died. He's like, okay, where? They're like, oh, just under the bed. The police mentioned that they had opened an investigation, but our guy wasn't a suspect because the body had been lying there for days before his arrival. So, great. New fear unlocked while traveling. Just gonna put that right under my fear of bedbugs. So we've all heard about some sort of boogeyman legend, right? The mythical creature that's gonna steal young humans who misbehave or whatever. So for years, young folks living in and around Staten Island kind of had goosebumps rising because of the tale of Cropsey, a boogeyman who lived in the woods and made a nocturnal habit of disemboweling anybody he stole. Parents were like, okay, come on, honey. That's no such thing. It's not true. Well, turns out it was real. Cropsey would drag humans from their beds, carrying a red-soaked axe in the crook of his arm, and well, ... The true identity of Cropsey was that of Andre Rand, born Frank Russian. In 1987, he was put on trial and convicted for abduction. Turns out he was connected to the rash of disappearances in the 1970s. He had a total of 5 notable alleged victims: Alice Pereira, Holly Ann Hughes, Tyahese Jackson, Hank Gaforio, and Jennifer Schweiger. He had once worked at Willowbrook, a defunct mental institution. Now, while he denied involvement in other cases, it's pretty clear that his activities had a heavy influence in the word-of-mouth stories that followed. Some folks even speculate that he was a Satanist who took the lives for sacrifices, and that he wasn't working alone. Yay. Here's a legend that terrifies me: rats in your toilet. These hardy rodents can climb, swim, and wriggle through tiny spaces with amazing agility. However, someone who has just been bitten on the butt while trying to use the bathroom might not be so impressed. Rats' superpowers are near mythical. They can swim for 3 days, they can fit through holes the size of a quarter. They're highly skilled at running and climbing both horizontally and vertically across pipes, drains, and along surfaces, which are just some of the ways that rats can use drains to their advantage. In addition to these capabilities, rats can also swim up to half a mile across the water in one go, and even dive through the water to enter exposed pipes and find their way into a toilet bowl. This means that rats can easily climb up drains, which is aided by the presence of water where they can swim. And once a rat has decided it wants to enter your home, it can easily swim and climb up the U-bend of a toilet to gain entry to the toilet bowl, which is also possible for rats, who climb up drainage systems from the outside. And hey, fun fact, despite our long human history with lab rats, we know very little about the lives of the rats in our homes. If we're gonna consult the experts, veterinary scientist Chelsea Hemsworth said in an interview that we probably know more about the ecology of polar bears than we do about rats. One of the most important findings of the Vancouver Rat Project has been that rats form highly stable family groups or colonies, block by block in any study. And when people break up rat families, say by trapping or poisoning, the remaining rats are forced to move, and that's when they tend to spread disease. Yeah, no thank you, absolutely not. Here's a doozy for us to end our day with: using real corpses as props. Notorious outlaw Elmer McCurdy took on a second life following his death, because in 1911, the embalmed corpse of McCurdy became a grim sideshow attraction throughout Texas, with people eager to see the famed criminal on display in funeral parlors and carnivals. Though it's hard to document all of his travels, he eventually wound up in Long Beach, California, where someone apparently mistook him for a prop. He was hung in a funhouse at the New Pike amusement park, his humanity discovered only after a crew member on the $6 Million Man, which was filming there in 1976, tried to adjust him, and they dislodged what was a very real arm. The following year, thankfully, his corpse was put to proper rest. Which, by the way, he's not the only real corpse that's been used for entertainment. Have you ever been on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland? Now, I'm pretty sure the Florida version only houses prop replicas, but the California ride originally featured genuine real-life skeletal bones. They were provided by the UCLA Medical Center and placed around various locations throughout the attraction, so the morbid incorporation of actual human remains came from the Walt Disney Company's perpetual strides towards perfection and authenticity. Long story short, the technology at the time just wasn't up to par for producing realistic enough fake ones. Fortunately, don't worry, that's no longer the case. Disney has since replaced most of the real bones with realistic fake ones. But there's at least one skull that is still very much the real deal. Apparently, you'll find it in the captain's quarters on the headboard behind the dead man skeleton in the bed with a magnifying glass and map. Some sources say there are other real bones still present in the attraction, so feel free to keep a close eye next time you visit the park. I know I will when I'm visiting soon. And that brings me to the end of my time once again. I've been Alexa, your resident ooky spooky girly, and if you were entertained by my ramblings today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hit the bell for more urban legend chatter from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.